really put a lot of emphasis on being there for the teens and for the mental health and drug problems that we're seeing. And some of our longtime skaters have gone forward to do a video that will be premiered this summer. It's called the Kickflip Project, and it's a tribute and awareness for mental health and skaters that were lost during COVID time. So I want to say thank you again, and I would ask you to continue supporting this. It goes greater than just the day of competition. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Karzeski. I apologize if I didn't get that exactly right.
Hi, my name is Jessica Karcheski. I am a Woodinville resident and student. I'm here to talk about the opportunities that I believe Woodinville Rep Theater can bring to people my age. Currently, I am a junior at Woodinville High School, and I've been involved in theater since 5th grade. Throughout this time, I've met so many new people, built new communities, and found a second home. However, one thing that's been missing is a place outside of school where myself and my peers can go to build creativity and community and learn more about theater. At Woodinville High School, we've been lucky enough to have an incredible program and production team. At the same time, there are at least 150 students currently participating in this department. And with only one teacher, that means that there are opportunities to learn, but they are often limited. For the teens who don't go to Woodinville High School, those opportunities are even more limited to outside the city. For the past few years, I've been searching for somewhere where I can go to build more on my craft, to learn more, to have fun, to meet more people. And unfortunately, the only places I've been able to find those are too far away. So it's not something that I've been able to do. With Woodinville Rep, their plan is to bring more classes and more opportunities to everyone, including people my age, that are right here in Woodinville, which means more people would be able to attend and be involved. This would greatly help so many people my age. I earlier today was talking to people just in my class, and they were telling me about how theater is a place where they don't have to feel insecure. It's a place where they can grow, where they can really feel comfortable. And for the people who don't have that and want to have that, Woodinville Rep can really bring that to them. It's also been a place to help them build public speaking skills. It's a place where, like I said, it's really just a second home. And right now that's missing in Woodinville. So hopefully Woodinville Rep can bring that. I believe they can. Thank you.
Thank you. Heather Hendricks McAdams.
Hello. My name is Heather Hendricks McAdams. I am not in the city limits, but my business is, and that would be Woodinville Repertory Theater. I'm the Director of Development and Board Vice Chair for the theater, but I'm not here to speak on behalf of the theater. I'm here to speak as a community member. Many of you know me from community meetings for the arts or for the Creative Arts District. You can find me working 40 to 60 hours or more per week for the arts in our town for free. Why would I do that? I'm married, I have 3 young children, we take care of my mother. It's not like I'm awash with free time. The simple answer is that theater made me who I am. It developed in me a deep sense of community service, my empathy for my neighbors that are struggling, my ability to manage multiple personalities, to bring together something special for the greater good, my courage to speak in front of City Council, asking for money to support the value that the performance arts brings to our youth and our city. I have witnessed firsthand the impact of theater. Based on statistics, I should not be standing in front of you today with the life that I have. As a latchkey kid of divorced parents from the rural South, I qualified for government assistance. We cannot afford summer camps or private programs. However, I was fortunate in that when I was a child in elementary, middle, and high school, public schools still invested heavily in robust arts programs. I took part in my first school-wide musical in 4th grade, and I never looked back. The knowledge that someone was counting on me and my skills. I was a part of something big. that they were waiting on me to show up and that they cared about me. It developed a deep sense of self-confidence and self-worth that what I had to give was valuable in the world. Without the opportunity to participate in theater, those things that I learned would have been lost to me. Many of the children in our area that attend North Shore School have just experienced severe funding cuts for the arts, making these programs even less accessible to them. It's not lost on me that the very children and people who would likely benefit the most from these programs, the theater programs, are typically unable to afford them. I would like to change that. The proposal before you requests the full amount of the community grant, and that would allow WRT to ramp up their efforts in a more expedited fashion. But as a community of volunteers, we are prepared to put to use whatever amount the council is able to provide. The show must go on. In theater, I was taught to work miracles. I can turn foam into the Great Wall of China. I can take a sheet of plywood and recreate the form of a tree. I can bring a woman who lived 200 years ago to life. We can take you somewhere you've never been and teach you about lives you've never known. We're used to making miracles with very few resources. The question is not whether or not this education program will exist or grow. The question before the council today is how many adults and children who do not have the resources to participate in this program will be able to participate. The more funding we receive from you, the faster we are able to scale the program throughout our local school districts and our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Clara McAdams.
Hello, my name is Clara McAdams and I'm an 8th grader living in Woodinville, Washington. I'm here to discuss how having a local theater education program would benefit the youth of Woodinville. After discussion with other teenagers, it can be agreed that creating community is a prominent benefit of theater. Having a local theater education program provides local relationships and a sense of belonging to our community. It increases mental health in the youth of our city. It gives youth the chance to practice social skills. Many talents learned in theater relate to other aspects of life. Acting and the art of becoming a character teaches empathy. Directing and stage managing enhance management and organization skills. Projection and comfort speaking in front of audiences are invaluable qualities that relate to confidence. Set and costume design correspond to creativity and resourcefulness. With an educational theater program, students could also gain experience in more specific jobs, such as improv and business environment, playwriting, lights and sound technology, building sets, and creating costumes. Theater has given me opportunities such as management and improv that have been incredible and had an incredible impact on my self-confidence and organization. The way I live my life now would not be the same without the help of theater. For example, I am able to present much more confidently and participate in more leadership roles due to theater. I would love to see more opportunities for myself and others that are easily accessible. Altogether, a local theater education program would be beneficial for mental health, life skills, and job experiences, strengthening our city's next generation. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Yabroff.
Good evening, Council. I'm Steve Yalbroff. I live here in the city limits of Woodinville. I had a chance late this afternoon to review the draft response to the environmental impact statement. It focuses on data. The concern I had after reading that is if this decision is going to be made on as a political basis, not data, throwing more data won't make a difference. So I hope we will consider the option of having a political-based response as well, but I'm not here to talk about that. About 10 days ago, we had a tree fall across our street, and it was across the street from us and landed partly in our yard. It stopped about 15 feet above the roadway, so it made a nice kind of arch, if you will, but not one that would be particularly safe. I managed to chat with my neighbor and said, "Have you called anybody?" He said, "I called 911. I said, "Okay." This was on a Saturday. About an hour and a half later, a chap from Public Works named Chris came out. He took a look and said, "I think we're going to need a boom truck for this one." An hour or so later, out comes a boom truck. I've talked to the people who were going to cut the tree and said, "Be careful. I don't want to have our lamp post and the trees the fallen tree was resting on destroyed." They said, hey, no problem, we can take care of that. About 40 minutes, 30 minutes later, it was all done. They'd thrown the pieces of the tree onto the side of the road, and they were gone. So there we were. We had pieces of tree left on the side of the road, and I said, hey, the road is clear. I'm happy. So guess what? Next morning, I get up and look around, and those pieces of the tree are gone. That afternoon, out comes a street sweeper cleaning up the street. You don't get this kind of service in every city. So my hat's off to the Public Works maintenance crew, and my thanks to Asha for the people that she takes care of and she mentors. Job well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Swanson.
Hi, I'm Steve Swanson, and I do live in Woodinville city limits, in fact, right next door, District Flats. I wasn't planning to read anything, but I reviewed this and thought, I'm just going to read this email, which I had sent to Mayor Millman a few days ago, and it reads as such. I have CC'd Dan Fleming and Brian Meyer, as I have spoken to both of them today about this situation. They both should be commended for their willingness to engage in an open discussion with me. Today, I watched a worker heavily apply chemicals, confirmed as Roundup, in the bark areas near City Hall. Within the hour, I saw an elderly lady walk her small dog in the exact same area. Several years ago, I personally lost a golden retriever at the age of 5 to lymphoma. I was told by my vet that likely causes of lymphoma in dogs are lawn chemicals. It's no secret now that Roundup is a known carcinogen to both animals and humans. I have another golden retriever now, and I used to walk her around this area, as do hundreds of other residents. And I'm really sick about the situation with Roundup. I was informed that they apply it several times a year when they see weeds. I invite every one of you to go out there and look. There are no weeds. If there were, they'd be brown now, probably. So we just put a bunch of Roundup on beauty bark for nothing. So as I wrote to Mayor Millman is, what can I do as a concerned citizen to get Roundup off of our city environments? So I'm a cancer survivor myself. And guess what? I had lymphoma. And my integrative medicine doctor told me that the likely cause is environmental carcinogens, of which Roundup, there's no secret. I Googled it just before I wrote the lawsuit, or wrote the email, and it said, Washington Roundup lawsuits are still being filed. Over 100,000 Roundup lawsuits have settled with juries awarding over $6.6 billion. This is no joke. What about the workers who have to apply that stuff? One of the most well-known lawsuits was a maintenance worker applying Roundup. Please, I hope somebody can let me know what else we can do to remedy this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion for the consent calendar?
I move to accept the consent calendar as written.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. On to the business items. First business item, number 6, presentation of the 2024 legislative session summary and federal advocacy visit. Mr. Hill.
All right. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. My name is Jared Hill, and I'm going to be providing you with the legislative summary and a DC advocacy visit briefing. We also have Jake Johnston, our federal lobbyist, on the call with us from DC as well. So I will start with a DC update to respect the time zone difference. I've also included a detailed summary at your seat that I was not able to include in the packet, but it's a helpful resource as well that you should have had at your chair when you walked in. So to kick this off, on March 7th, Mayor Millman and the city manager, assistant to the city manager, and myself were honored to represent the city of Woodinville in Washington, D.C. The city has embarked on an effort to develop a strong working relationship with its congressional delegation with the goal of building policy and financial support for the city's identified priorities. We had the opportunity to discuss city initiatives with the offices of Senator Cantwell and Murray, as well as with Representatives Del Bene, Strickland, and Larson. Here in the picture, you can see us with Representative Del Bene, as well as the photo that we sent to her, which was painted by a Woodinville artist. A complete summary of meetings has been provided to you, but key points of discussion included Little Bear Creek appropriations requests for fiscal year 2024 and conversations about steps forward for requests in fiscal year 2025. Last year, the city requested congressional spending of $2.25 million for the Little Bear Creek culvert replacement project, and we successfully received $850,000 of that request thanks to the work of Congresswoman Del Bene and her staff. We were able to discuss next steps in closing that funding gap to ensure more miles of fish habitat are unlocked. We discussed the outcome of how our RAISE grant application went and how we have resubmitted for 2025 with the support of over 40 organizations. This gave us the chance to thank our offices for the support of East Row and Woodinville and their rail banking efforts. With strong relationships, we have secured complete delegation support for the city's RAISE planning grant in the amount of $5 million and received commitments to advocate for Woodinville with Secretary Buttigieg directly should our application make it through the evaluation process with a favorable score. Finally, we were able to highlight the need for a medium-sized city set aside in grant opportunities. Medium-sized cities like Woodinville have difficulty accessing federal infrastructure grants due to having limited staff resources to apply and the fact that we have to compete against larger cities such as LA or Chicago, who have dozens of people on staff for grant applications specifically. Overall, it was a very successful visit, and hearing the excitement around all the work happening in Woodinville from our legislators was very uplifting. Our delegation and the Washington delegation in general continues to be very supportive of Woodinville and efforts, and we left DC feeling excited about the progress underway. I'm now going to turn it over to Jake, who will quickly touch on the visit, and we will both be available for any questions or comments before I move on to the state legislative update.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. It was a pleasure to be with the city in DC last week, and unlike the city, I'm still here, so I am looking forward to getting home at my earliest convenience. I think Jared did a phenomenal job of covering the high points in terms of the conclusions that we received as a result of the visits last week, but I think the highlight is really that the city continues to invest in this partnership and that the federal government is engaged, asking good questions, and really trying to figure out how they can be the best partner to the city to advance the city's goals. Those goals are not limited to this agenda itself, but also looking at the policy agenda for the next transportation bill to make sure that we can put reforms in place so that the city can take advantage of the infrastructure and climate funding that's been included. Again, I think Jared hit the highlights. We kind of accomplished the primary goals that were set out. We have unanimous delegation support for our agenda, and I really feel like the partnership continues to deepen and be augmented by the city's efforts. These are really important trips to make, and they're important meetings to take with the delegation in order to advance this agenda, oftentimes with staff in DC that are the professional staff that kind of execute the strategy for these efforts in DC, but don't make it out to the state very often. So again, happy to take any questions and appreciate the chance to join you this evening.
Any questions for Jake? Have we any update on where we're at on the future? We were talking June. We're still looking at June, possibly decisions on our other asks.
For the NOAA grant, that's correct. We don't have an updated timeline. That they've said the latest is still June.
So I can add a little bit more to that. So we've got a couple deadlines that we're working with. We have our NOAA grant, which is for our 134th, 195th culvert project. We should be hearing about that hopefully relatively soon. in the next couple months, certainly at the latest. We have our RAISE planning grant that we've resubmitted the NOFA, the funding notice for that. And typical to last year, would have them making a decision on that by the end of June. And then we're also, Jared and Jake are working to resubmit our, I'm going to get the acronym wrong, our community funding request, the appropriation request that we submitted last year, that we only got the 850 out of the 2.25. We're going to apply for the balance, that 1.4, and they're working to get that done. I think the first deadline for Cantwell's office is next week, and so it's a very short turnaround on that. And then Delveni and Murray's office will follow shortly after that. But there's a number of different areas at the federal level that we're working on tight deadlines.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, thank you, Jake. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm going to bed.
Thank you, Jake. All right. So now, if it's all right, I'll move over to the state legislative summary. Session is over. Great news. Session adjourned on March 7th, and Governor Inslee has until March 30th to veto, partially veto, or approve legislation and budgets approved by the legislature. The legislature introduced nearly 1,200 bills and ultimately passed 379 bills during the 60-day session. Major policy discussions included land use, affordable housing, taxation, climate change, rent regulations, human services, public safety, and funding tools. The legislature adopted the 2023-2025 supplemental operating, capital, and transportation budgets, which included increases to budget items that impacted school districts. Education was the largest amount of spending in this year's capital and operating budgets, and a legislative recap of how NSD fared this session will be sent to council when it's available from the North Shore School District Board, since I know that's something you're all interested. The 2024 supplemental transportation budget spent a total of $14.6 billion, including $340 million from the Climate Commitment Act accounts, which are contingent upon voters' rejection of Initiative 2117. Funds were predominantly spent on projects already scheduled to receive funding during the 2023-2025 biennium, and we were able to move our $5 million in Move Ahead Washington funds up a decade, which was exciting. As you know, we are thankful to Senator Stanford and Representative Dewar, who helped move our $5 million in Move Ahead Washington funds up 10 years. And some other areas I wanted to touch on are for housing and land use. A few bills that we've already discussed throughout the session were passed and some did not pass. So we're just going to kind of jump through these here. So House Bill 1998, which was sponsored by Representative Gregerson, required cities to allow co-living. This bill did pass, and co-living is housing where sleeping units within the same home are rented independently, are lockable, and provide living and sleeping space. Senate Bill 6015, which was sponsored by Senator Shoemake, states that certain types of parking must be allowed to meet minimum parking requirements. This is the parking bill we've talked about quite a bit. This means that a city cannot require parking to be enclosed or require a garage or carport. Tandem parking must be allowed to count towards parking minimums, and a city may not require parking spaces greater than 8 feet by 20 feet.
Councilmember Evans.
Sorry, I need to stop you there. Are there any carve-outs for cities of various sizes or without transportation, or this is just across the board in Washington State? We cannot require this kind of parking.
Cities that aren't part of the GMA are excluded, but all cities. That's
we happen to be in the GMA, so we're not excluded.
Right. Yep, and yeah, so we are included in the bill.
Wow. So this has some pretty major impacts on residents and businesses here.
One thing that is an amendment that I would say was a win on the Woodinville side. It doesn't. It was a later amendment added that existing lots don't need, if they repave the lot, they don't need to adhere to the latest law. So they're able to. So say they go and repave a existing parking lot, they are able to maintain the parking that they had previously instead of updating that.
But what if they want to do away with it and put something else there?
Yeah, that's a great concern. Yeah.
I mean, I really do have a concern about this because we also have the GMA targets that we're supposed to hit, and we have no reliable transportation. So this is an issue. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point. A couple of bills I wanted to mention that did not pass included the TOD bill, which was HB 2160, and the lot splitting bill, which was HB 1245. One that we had kind of talked about a little bit was a bill sponsored by Representative Morgan that directed the Office of Financial Management to secure consultants to study the creation of Washington State Department of Housing. That's something we had kind of alluded to, but that bill ultimately did not pass. So while not related to our legislative agenda, HB 2384 passed, which allows cities and counties expanded authority to use automated traffic safety cameras and retain all the revenue generated from those cameras. There is a caveat to this, is that revenues generated from the cameras must be used for traffic safety purposes, and a proportionate share of the revenues must be spent in census tracts with household incomes in the lowest quartile in areas that experience above average rates of injury crashes. So overall, we feel that Woodinville did pretty well this legislative session. We're really grateful for council support and advocacy of the legislative agenda and our representatives as well, in always hearing Woodinville's concerns. I'm looking forward to working with you all to develop our 2025 legislative agenda later this year. And I do want to also go over some state initiatives that are good to have on your mind as well. So this is mainly just for reference, a few items that aren't specifically relevant to the city, but I think are just good to have on your radar. 6 initiatives went to the legislature and were filed prior to the legislative session. For each initiative, the legislature had 3 options. It's to pass the proposed initiative into law, take no action, which therefore forwards the proposal to voters in November of 24, or forward the proposed initiative to voters in November 2024 with a similar alternative. So in February, the legislature held public hearings on 3 of the measures, and it adopted them during the final days of session. They'll take effect 90 days or after they were adopted, or approximately on June 5th. So they're listed up on the screen, but Initiative 2081 is relating to parental access to educational materials used in public schools. 2109 prohibits state or local governments from imposing an income tax. And 2113 allows officers to engage in vehicular pursuits on more occasion. One that's just going to be coming back later this fall, there's actually 3 initiatives that will be coming back on the November ballot, and that's Initiative 2124, which makes it optional to participate in the state's long-term care program, and 2117, which is to repeal the Climate Commitment Act, and 2111 to repeal the capital gains tax. So those are just some things to have on your radar as part of the wrap up from this legislative summary. And that concludes my presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Hill? Seeing none, I would like to just emphasize that going back to DC and our process down in Olympia is a task that a lot of stuff is happening behind the scenes that council and the public don't really see. Preparing the packet, we had, I don't remember the number, it was said earlier, but it was a lot of support on some of our initiatives, and Jared knocked that out of the park. I kept offering help, and I got this, and he certainly did. So staff really deserves some kudos for all their work, both on the federal and state side. We're over $3 million in just a 2-year push for engaging with our federal government. We had an interesting interaction that kind of highlights why it's important to be there. We were in the hall walking towards Congresswoman Del Bene's office, and she passed and said, "Well, Woodinville's here," and then engaged and talked before we met with her. And then when we went to her office for our meeting with her, opened up the door, and right there was the Woodinville Arts Alliance, Nicole Monahan, painted right there when we opened up the door, which was, my cynical wife said, yeah, they probably just moved it before you came there. And I told her, don't rain on my parade, it's right there. But it was really nice to see we're being recognized and we're getting good return on our investments, both at the federal and state level. And I just want to really highlight the hard work staff has done and how important it is to be there in person to actually work with our representatives. So thank you again for the work. Okay. Business item number 7, review of draft response letter for King County NERTS, Northeast Recycling and Transfer Station Environmental Impact Statement. Mr. Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. This evening, we've got a brief presentation that I'll have Jared run through kind of the timeline of where we're at in the process, just for reminding everybody. And then we have, of course, the draft letter in your packets. It is a first draft. We have, of course, staff and our consultant remotely. We're open, of course, to taking any feedback. If you have any edits you suggest, of course, if there is additional edits that you don't quite have ready yet, you feel free to send those to us in the next couple of days as we work on preparing a final version of this for hopefully presentation at your April 2nd meeting. Of course, that's trying to get before the April 9th deadline for submitting EIS comments. So with that, I'll have Jared run through the presentation, and then we can have a discussion about any edits that the council sees fit for the letter.
All right, thank you, Brandon. Good evening, honorable mayor and council members. My name is Jared, and I will be providing you with a check-in on the NERTS draft EIS process and comment period. So last month, King County published the draft EIS for NERTS, which identifies the impact to the 2 sites. As part of the multi-pronged approach to opposing this project, staff has been preparing a response to the draft EIS with consultant support from Eco Northwest, and we have the director, Morgan Shook, on the line with us as well for additional comments and questions. Comments are due by April 9th, and tonight, council is being asked to review and provide any needed changes to the city's comments or send any changes to staff within the next couple days before we need to include the final copy in council's April 2nd agenda packet for final consideration. So King County will soon replace the aging Houghton Recycling and Waste Transfer Station, serving residents of Woodinville, Kirkland, Redmond, Sammamish, and unincorporated Northeast King County. The Houghton Transfer Station is one of King County's busiest transfer station, but it offers limited recycling service and lacks the capacity to expand or provide more recycling services to meet the needs of the growing population in this area. Tonight's consideration is just one of the many components that go into the opposition efforts before a decision is ultimately made by the King County Solid Waste Director. So just a brief look back on the timeline for where we're at here. So council has previously authorized funds for an independent analysis of the potential impacts of the new recycling and transfer station in the West Valley area of the city. Since that time, staff and the consultant team have been taking a deep dive into that potential economic and traffic impacts that may result from the NERTS facility. Meanwhile, King County has finished the scoping process and published its draft environmental impact statement, or EIS, process. This is a copy of it, just so everyone can see how crazy this is. These findings have helped shape the comment letter before you tonight and raise significant concerns with the Woodinville location. So this is taken directly from the King County website. It's a helpful visual on the timeline moving forward. So while the draft EIS is open for comment, the King County team has held 2 in-person open houses and 1 virtual. The Woodinville open house was held on March 13th at Woodinville High School, and we had more than double the attendees of the Kirkland open house, which I think speaks volumes of the commitment from this community to be engaged on this. Following the April 9th cutoff, King County will respond to and summarize the comments they received from the draft EIS comment period in a final EIS that is scheduled to be issued later this fall. Towards the end of the year, the King County Solid Waste will take into account the results of the environmental review and then an equity impact report, socioeconomic impact assessment, and project cost information into account when selecting the location for the new recycling and transfer station. And then that will kick off a 3-year design and permitting process, followed by a 2-year construction window with the facility opening in 2029. So with that said, Morgan, Brandon, or myself are happy to answer any questions and write down any edits you have to the document in front of you. And if you see any additional changes over the next few days, please feel free to email them over. And that goes to anyone else as well. If you have any additional comments, please feel free to reach out. And that concludes the presentation part of this.
Thank you. Councilmember Best-Campbell.
So there's 9 pages of questions, just to give people a perspective of how many things are wrong with the EIS that we received. what I'm noticing reading through it is, just given the reception we got from Solid Waste Division at our, at Woodinville High School, they're not interested in hearing what we have to say. So my concern is it's very wordy, and if we could shrink the words and add numbers, it's hard to argue with numbers. There's talk about the additional mileage, there's talk about mitigation efforts, but they're very light on details about how much they're willing to spend on mitigation efforts, how much it costs to buy land, how much it costs to mitigate at one site versus the other. They're vague references, they're not specific. So I think if we were to hit them with anything, it's basic facts with numbers. Numbers don't lie. People do, but numbers don't. And I think the letter at the beginning of this, it feels like it could read to two different people. I think it should read, because this is for EIS, we make it incredibly technical and precise, shorten the language and say, for the following reasons, Woodinville believes that the EIS is flawed. The following 9 pages are for your amusement, and send them all the information. The less language we have and the more work we make them to do, I think the better chances we have they're going to actually do the work that we're asking them to do. And I know that this EIS did not include anything economic related. There still should be a barb in there that they promised us. And if you don't have it in this EIS, then when is it coming? That does need to be something to consider, because there is considerable cost to Woodinville. And apropos of shortening the letter based on who it's to, I think we should consider a politician letter to the elected officials. They have very different points of contact that are going to be important, particularly both the climate action plan for the county and the RePlus program from solid waste. Both measure success of carbon reduction in tankers full of gas saved. And our site it increases the number of tankers of gas saved. So it's that sort of hypocrisy that I think is lost on solid waste, but perhaps not on the elected officials who crafted this. So I would be in favor of shortening the words, adding the numbers, and then perhaps doing a secondary letter, again, probably after we do the EIS would make sense. Just hit the numbers and just do some basic calculations and say, okay, disprove what we said then. If somehow 17 miles worth of gas looks different in terms of carbon emissions in your world, explain that to us. So that would be my 2 cents on that.
Those are really helpful comments. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, when reviewing the letter, I think you do make a lot of strong arguments, but I think I would echo that there needs to be a stronger abstract at the start and end. I mean, when this letter is going to go to people, we hope that they read everything thoroughly, but a lot of times you may read the first couple of pages, then the last paragraph. So making sure we make our impact up front, it makes them actually want to continue reading as well. Again, you have great arguments being made there, great questions being asked. I think we just need to strengthen it up front on the first few pages to make sure that impact is made right away.
Thank you.
Councilmember Evans.
I also want to know where the teeth are. We're showing up with facts, but I want to know what teeth we're going to put behind this, because I don't believe that they really take us seriously, that we will fight this. I know that we have talked about this multiple times. I think that the residents and the business owners here in the city are rightly worried about what's going to happen when this decision is made. I agree that we should be reaching out separately with an influence campaign to the elected officials, because I think they're going to have a very different opinion about this, especially given what they voted for, what they stand behind. I think there are 100 reasons against putting it here, and I can't find any good reasons to put it here other than, you know, they feel like they can push us around. And so I want to know what teeth we're going to put behind this. Because as I read the letter, I was like, okay, this is a lot of great facts, but where is the influence and where is the strength?
Yeah, I agree. And I think council discussed, I think there's some wisdom in the idea of breaking this out and really targeting who the audiences are for these different communications, right? You've got this letter, which is it is specifically responding to the EIS, which is a very technical process, which is 9 of the 10 pages that we have here. And I think there is a lot of wisdom in breaking out kind of the political influence, I think was the term we talked about, the letter in a separate communication to them. Like, it will have some of these points, right? We're talking about the increased, in very succinct form, I think. The increased carbon is one example, right? And a number. And the increased cost of acquiring the property here as opposed to property already owned. Like
And eminent domain. I mean, they're
Right,
going to
right.
steal somebody's
Right.
land and force 6 businesses out of business. I
Right.
think these are the sorts of things that we really need to make sure are raised, because we're not getting the press attention, we're not getting the elected attention. We need to start fighting back.
Yeah, and we've done previous versions of some of that letter with some of those talking points. I think the timing is right. We respond to the EIS. That's a technical process, but also to continue that political pressure process, which is a new and refreshed letter, I think.
Thank you. Yes, I agree.
Deputy Mayor Randolph.
One of the things that we did come up with, we wanted to make sure that they did an analysis of the economic impacts of this, and that's something that's missing from their impact statement, but we should definitely do a piece for ours unless it's already being handled by another entity. We just want to make sure that we restate or amplify that entity in our messaging.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That's one, we, for lack of a better way to describe it, that economic piece has kind of been minimized by the process. And I think including the big scary numbers that we've uncovered in our analysis of the economic impact in that letter to the on the political pressure side is where that's really going to be impactful. Of course, if they put out this economic study that they've promised they're going to do that we've yet to see, we can submit comments to that, but that's going to go to a staff level, right, as opposed to the elected level. So I think including that among these points that we would put in the second letter is wise to do.
So a couple points that I'd like to make so that people know that we are taking care of, we're fighting this battle on many fronts. We're fighting it on an economic, an environmental, a logistical, and even a legal. We pointed out that they have an ordinance that no one area will be overburdened with solid waste, and that we are doing our part for Little Woodinville for solid waste. They'd be violating their own ordinance. We didn't agree with the process. So that's the legal part of it. And yes, it's been mentioned earlier that there is a political part of it too, because in the end, the council are political animals, and they would have to eventually vote to eminent domain or purchase property, and that would be a council vote to do that. That would not be Pat McLaughlin's decision. So to that end, I personally reached out to several council members and talked to them about several of these issues that we just talked about. I have a meeting set up with Executive Director Constantine coming up to highlight some of our concerns. So we are, and I also had I started a petition to show that Woodinville community is not in support of having the transfer station here. So if you haven't seen it, there is a QR code that you can just go and scan and sign your name to in opposition, and I list some of the reasons for that. So we are actively pursuing many angles. I would like to see the carbon output that this would require more distinctly, because when you talk to some of the council members, sometimes when you're in person with somebody, you can get a good sense on what is resonating and what isn't through just body language or tone. And several of the council members have had concerns about the climate environmental impact, and particularly in relation to carbon, where you're moving away from the main population centers, and you're having more truck trips and well off 405 deep into our city, and then the trucks from the transfer station would then literally go past the site in Kirkland where it used to be on their way to Maple Grove. So that carbon number should be highlighted a big, bold, early, because I think that will definitely have an impact. So I'd like to see that highlighted a little better. Councilmember Best-Campbell.
For the letter, I don't know where we could put this in, but I think it's important to note that the siting advisory group did not put forward any sites for recommendation. They were so fed up with the process. Even the Houghton site, they said no. There was an immense revolt. I think that's important for King County Solid Waste to remember, that they can't hide behind the advisory group, which they've said historically. Also part of the process, and again, this might be something that we do on the political angle, there are 2 sites in Redmond that were not even included in analysis. This was brought up at the meeting at Lake Washington High School the previous week. These sites were not looked at. We had Wellington Elementary was looked at and excluded. Everything in Woodinville was looked at. 2 sites, Cadman and a site that's actually owned by King County, it's a gravel pit, were not included in the analysis. Now, a lot of Redmond sites were excluded because of an aquifer recovery area. These are not designated as that. So there are 2 sites. I have the parcel numbers. I could send it to you at a later date. But these were not included, and they weren't analyzed. I looked through the entire document. This is part of the problem of the process that the siting advisory group has had, is this piecemeal approach to selecting sites. And it feels like certain cities were excluded because of reasons we don't know, and it makes our faith in the process diminish. And I think this is probably more of a political point. It's hard to support politicians who don't support you. If we feel that there are other sites that the city or that the county owns, why not save $30 million on mitigation efforts if you've already got that site? But just going back to the EIS, I do think it's important that the public engagement, the siting advisory group, was wholeheartedly upset and not happy with the process from start to finish. And I think that King County Solid Waste needs to be reminded that these sites that they chose did not have any support from anyone in the community, including the Houghton site, which scored erroneously the highest of all of them, and Woodinville was the lowest, go figure. So I'll send you some of this information. How late can we send you data and information for inclusion in that April 2nd meeting?
We need it sooner than later. We've got to make edits to the letter and have it ready for your packets end of next week. So next couple days would be much appreciated.
And then
Monday at the latest.
Then one more thing, because we don't have anything else to do on the April 2nd meeting that we have. Kirkland will be getting their EIS response. If someone would be kind enough to watch that and record it in real time, maybe they'll cover it before we cover ours, and we could see what their perspective is and see how we can maybe amplify a message that they have that would help Houghton look like a better site and they get more mitigation. We could be helpful as well as not have it here. I think that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, just what came to mind too, when we talked about multiple different letters based on audience, one thing to consider is letter based to the executive side, which like Constantine and solid waste, and then the legislative side. I think the legislative side will be especially important for education, especially since there's been turnover there over the past few months. The new two districts, 4 and 8, have new council members there. So making sure that they're up to speed with what's been happening there and building that relationship in terms of the impact they will have here, I think will be important. So even if there can't be 2 different letters, I mean, one way to separate it, again, is legislative versus executive if we want to do a political letter as well.
Any other comments? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you for all the work. Business item number 8, 2024 Draft Transportation Plan Update. Ms. D'Souza.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. This evening, excited to bring the draft transportation back to you again. We are working very hard on putting the draft plan, the document itself, with all the analysis and all the information that was gathered for last year and a half with respect to this project. So we are today bringing another update to the council with the intent of presenting, summarizing all the evaluation analysis that we did and focusing on the draft project list as well. We still have the draft plan that was included in the staff report. It's still a work in progress document as we go through, present this to council tonight, and we are taking it to Planning Commission next week as part of the public hearing process, and we'll continue to do work on the draft plan until we bring back the draft plan to council, the final draft to council, again, hopefully in April or May. So just working through the draft plan, working through the project list, just buttoning up any loose ends, fine-tuning some of the evaluations we have done. So just working on just closing the loop on the document itself. So today I'm joined by Kendra Brillen with Farron Pierce, who will also tag along with me on presenting this. And again, as this is more an update discussion, feel free to interrupt us and ask any questions that you may have. We also have, of course, time at the end to ask any questions of us. Okay.
Pleasure to be here with you again tonight. Our topics are updated policies, our steps in the needs assessment. So really how we truly tried to capture the state of the city from the perspective of transportation, our process in developing the project list, and our next steps to take over kind of the balance of kind of this project and really kind of the balance of 2024. So with that, we'll move on to our first topic, the policy update. And kind of if we can go to the next slide, first of all, just foundation, this transportation plan, of course, is supporting the transportation element of your comprehensive plan. They are two separate documents, but the transportation plan is really meant to be the more foundational element or foundational plan. So as we're developing the plan, we definitely are mindful of PSRC guidance for documents like the transportation plan and for comprehensive plans. So this, as we're developing the plan, and we're also supporting your transportation element, we definitely consulted the plan review memo, which provides a checklist to ensure that each element contains key information to make sure that you're ready for approval by PSRC. This body's put a lot of work into reviewing this plan. We definitely want to make sure that at the end of this process that you guys are moving forward with compliance such that you can be eligible for funding and all the good things that come with a plan being approved by regional and state agencies. So on the next page, just wanted to share some of the new policies that we have added into the plan. And these are mostly responsive either to new requirements or emerging best practices. So generally, just I'm not going to read all of these in great detail here, but first policy is around introducing multimodal concurrency. That is a requirement in this round for basic state and regional compliance, and very much in line with, I think, where the community is trying to go. That also applies to the final policy that we have on this page around multimodal level of service standards. The PSRC checklist and the state checklists that we've gone through also require us to be more thoughtful in thinking about freight and goods movement as a significant user of your transportation system. And just given kind of some of the industries in Woodinville, this makes a lot of sense. So a lot of these other policies relate to how we're thinking about how freight is using your transportation system, whether it's off-peak truck deliveries and really encouraging that, whether it's thinking about how are we promoting kind of safe usage of your roadways by people walking, biking, and freight. So that's gives you a sense of kind of what we've got in the new policies. And I'm going to move on to really kind of what is the meat and potatoes of this analysis in our citywide needs assessment. So as we started thinking about what are those projects that should form kind of the real foundation of this plan, we used kind of three primary lenses to approach kind of that question. First, community feedback. That's been central to our process since day one, since the storefront studios we had in 2022, to our interactions with both this body and the Planning Commission. So we'll talk about how that feedback is being incorporated. Second, big piece of it, this is a technical piece. We want to make sure that the recommendations that we're looking at truly work. And so capacity analysis has been very central to our work. And then last but not least, one of the first steps that we took as a part of this plan was really to establish a set of plan goals. So it's making sure that the recommendations of this plan are advancing those plan goals that we defined with the community back in the fall of 2022. So just some fun pictures here. As I've shared in previous presentations, the transportation plan enjoyed a robust outreach with the Woodinville community. Our robust outreach approach allowed us to gather feedback in any format that people were comfortable providing it, whether it was through surveys, whether it was free-form comments, one-on-one conversations. We heard a lot of things, but it included a desire for more transit connections, a more walkable downtown, and the desire to support greener forms of transportation. And, if we can go back to the last slide just really quickly here, staff led an additional workshop back in October to get additional feedback from the community on kind of the draft project list. So I think, I really do want to commend the city on really going above and beyond to incorporate the city's community's thoughts. And I think that brings us to the next slide of our very robust online engagement. More than 1,000 folks viewed the city's project site, and more than 100 people, it's hard to tell the exact number, provided input on potential projects, but a lot of the input that we got was very detailed, so we appreciate that thought. And in terms of what we heard, just generally, some of the big themes that came out of our outreach were concerns about parking and traffic. That exists. We absolutely acknowledge that. Support for completing the city's system to offer more robust connections for walking and biking. And it was notable that even in a community where a lot of people do need to drive to, kind of hit their daily activities to get to work, more than 40% of the comments really centered on a desire for a more complete transportation system from the perspective of people choosing to walk and bike and roll to their destinations. And then last but not least, I would be remiss if I did not kind of acknowledge kind of all the time that both this body and the Planning Commission has provided to this process. And I would say this list here only covers 2023. And this year, it actually doesn't even show kind of all the time and attention that this body in particular put into the transportation plan in 2022 and probably even before my contract started up. So a large thank you to all of the attention and all of the time that you've put to bring us to this place. And as you see, here we're to talk about the project list and the draft plan tonight. We're planning to go back to the Planning Commission next week for a public hearing and to describe the draft plan, and hoping to come back to this body in May for plan adoption. So with that, we'll go on to kind of the more technical lens that we applied to this project. And I would say that we did our due diligence to model anticipated growth, evaluate intersection performance with that growth, and to identify locations that would need to be improved to accommodate increased traffic that we anticipate. And I've shown this slide before, but this next slide is a new one for this body. We wanted to give you some of the fun details around kind of some of the traffic modeling work that we've done. So just to share, we looked at 2 horizon years, both 2022, which formed as kind of our existing conditions, but we also looked out to 2044, which is our comp plan horizon year. But in terms of that comp plan horizon year, we actually looked at 2 scenarios, both your 2044 targets that, of course, were given to the city to plan around. But in addition, we also looked at your GB rezone to make sure that we were considering how either of these future land use horizons really would impact potential project needs. We looked at 2 peak hours. We looked at both the morning commute and the afternoon commute. And we looked at the 36 intersections that are highlighted there on the slide. Just if you're kind of curious, well, how much is traffic expected to grow in Woodinville over this planning horizon? About 20% from today. So that's about a 1% annual growth rate. That's pretty typical for this part of the county, so we felt pretty good about that. But just it's definitely not going to be exactly the same in 2044 as what we expect today. And we also looked at different facilities around the city to understand kind of pass-through traffic. So we know that Woodinville is a regional crossroads, particularly as we think about unincorporated King County, as we think about Kirkland and Bothell as our neighbors, and as we think about Snohomish County. So as we started to look at roadways like SR 202 and your downtown and Woodinville Duval Road, we were able to see that your transportation system does accommodate a fair amount of pass-through traffic. I don't know what we can do short of putting gates up at the city boundaries, which of course we can't do, but it's a reality that Woodinville needs to plan within. You're definitely very much a citizen of the region, and your transportation investments that you make in this community have regional impact. So this next slide, just going to show intersection level of service results that we're forecasting. So on the left-hand side of the screen, we've got, I know it's really hard to see on the screen size here, so I apologize for that. We show kind of what intersection operations are today, and it shows AM and PM, and you can definitely see along your 175th corridor considerably more congestion around the 195th interchange. You can see a fair amount of congestion. We also have some intersections that are just really not operating optimally today. And as we move into the future, the picture may look very similar to you, but I would stress that this future kind of takes into account two things. One, there's the growth that I mentioned, but on top of that, there are some of your assumed regional transportation investments that have been built into the modeling. This includes things like that we know are coming, like the Trestle project. That's going to make a big difference in terms of how easily people are able to navigate into Woodinville, but it also includes maybe some longer-term projects that we're monitoring the need for, like 202 widening. We know that there's a lot of traffic on that regional crossroads, so keeping an eye towards the potential future need to widen that, and that's something that the city would be monitoring over time. So we can go to the next slide. And the third lens, and I think I've talked about it to this body a fair amount, so I won't go into a significant amount of detail tonight, but is really kind of going back to those 5 goals that were identified with the community at the very beginning of this effort. And we have been evaluating how projects advance those goals. But I think, one of the things that we think is really important to stress is that this plan really just provides that very long-term, very high-level roadmap for transportation. Your actual prioritization and timing of projects is still something that is done through your CIP process, which of course is updated a lot more frequently. So just the next couple of slides show kind of the way that we measured kind of how we test whether a project might be adhering to one of those goals. So whether it's advancing the goal through maintaining level of service for vehicles, or whether it's providing accommodations for peds or bikes, we worked closely with staff to identify measurable performance metrics that potentially the city could consider bringing into its CIP process to better inform some of the project prioritization as well. So this next slide just shows the other 2 goals. And I'm going to now move on to the exciting stuff, which is the draft project list. And this body may remember, I was here in December and provided this body provided some very good feedback. We also heard some very good feedback from members of the community that shared their perspectives. So in sharing the draft project list, there are actually that draft project list has very much been informed by kind of some of the input that we've received. So the first kind of slide here are capacity projects. So these are projects that are providing essentially more vehicle capacity. This is not a promise that all of these projects would be constructed. In fact, over the next 20 years, in fact, I think I can, in good faith, promise that all of them will not. But this is kind of like a menu. These are the things that we've run the model. We've done a lot of traffic analysis. And we've identified that these are potential investments that you should continue to consider over time. Some of those key capacity improvements include the grid roadways. We know those are of high interest to the community to really kind of help better distribute traffic, particularly in your downtown. But it also is providing key capacity adds to areas where you're very constrained. One of those examples would be the 202 and 175th intersection. That intersection we know is a big bottleneck. And so as a part of this plan, we've started to explore ways that we can provide more capacity at that facility. And of course, things that you already know about significantly, like your trestle project, that's of course also one of those key capacity improvements. The next slide, wanted to talk a little bit about safety improvements. So these are mainly a lot of intersection improvements around the city that can really make your intersections either more intuitive or safer for people. These are generally locations where either the current configuration of the intersection, it might just be a stop sign, it might be a bit confusing, and so really improvements like adding roundabouts, adding signalization, and a few crossing and lighting treatments, really kind of looking at how can we make the transportation system feel safer for everyone who's using it. And then the last kind of category of projects that I wanted to share, and it's a big category, is very responsive to that community feedback that we heard of just a strong desire for completing Woodinville's transportation system to give everyone options. And there's definitely some projects that have been added to this or looked at in more detail since that feedback. I know one that people are really excited about is that West Ridge connection to downtown. So we've got a lot of projects in here. So the next slide, I just wanted to kind of talk about the projects, just kind of highlight some of the projects that are really advancing some key things, some key priorities of the plan. One is level of service mitigation. This is a state requirement. This is a regional requirement. If you establish a level of service standard, concurrency simply means that as you grow, you're going to make sure that you're maintaining your transportation system. So as you're looking at that very long list of projects that we shared, these are some of the projects that are the most effective in really kind of helping you maintain those level of service standards. So you guys are already making great progress with, kind of your trestle replacement. I know that the city has been coordinating with WashDOT and thinking about what can we do with SR 202 and the 195th interchange. Those are, kind of key projects for LOS mitigation. I will say, given, kind of the travel demand forecast and the growth that we're seeing in the city, SR 202 widening may eventually be a discussion topic. It doesn't mean it's tomorrow, it doesn't mean it's next year, but it's something to be on your radar that as you're growing as a community, that's something you need to monitor the operations of that facility. Go to the next slide. Projects that came out of community input. So again, we do take it very seriously that the community showed up to so many events, provided so much feedback, and that bodies like this body and the Planning Commission has provided so much feedback. So here's some of the top projects that really excited the community. Those grid roads, people are very excited about them. Some of these, well, I guess most of these are grid roads here, but the SR 202 and 175th intersection reconfiguration, we showed a lot of pictures of this to the community, some ideas, some concepts to address that pinch point. That was one that had a lot of interest. And then last but not least, I wanted to stress the 132nd Avenue Pocket Park / active connection. That's kind of that roadway right here in downtown, just north of 175th. The idea that if you're going to extend 133rd in that area, having 132nd as another street connection right next to it may no longer make sense. And it provides a huge opportunity to maybe provide a friendlier connection for people wanting to walk or bike. Also, potentially a park opportunity. So this doesn't have to be exclusively a transportation project, but it offers a lot of benefits also in how we're thinking about the operations of 175th. And then last but not least, I just wanted to highlight safety projects that, really kind of resonated. A lot of your roundabouts and signalization, really kind of some of these intersections. Woodinville has a lot of very tricky intersections. So these are some of the top locations that we would recommend considering. And then I think I got a little ahead of myself. I'm sorry. So that's a great segue though. Thank you, Asha. So where are we? We're getting towards the end of this process. So we've been working dutifully with your city staff team since the middle of 2022. We worked with them to think through modal policies. We worked with them to generate project ideas and collaborated with the community. We've been looking to prioritize projects, and we are now at a place where we are looking to develop both the draft transportation plan and work with this body on that, but also to incorporate these concepts into the comprehensive plan transportation element. So these are kind of the two pieces that are moving forward in 2024 for city council adoption. And so with that, just again, I kind of, in the previous slides, kind of went over some of these top performing projects, but again, we've identified kind of those top capacity projects, those top safety projects, and top walk bike projects. And on the next slide, it just shows kind of all of these projects together. As you can see, these are the tops. This isn't everything, but I guess if we were really pushing aspects of the menu, if I was the waiter really trying to push my favorite entrees, these projects would be it. So certainly we, fully respect that situations change, needs arise, developments crop up, sometimes developments fall through. So this project list represents kind of our best idea as of March 2024. We know this is going to change over time, but at some point, as a part of a transportation planning process, we have to kind of just peg a date and time, and this is kind of what we're pegging for this plan. So with that, I want to just quickly go into next steps so that we can get into a conversation. The other kind of critical aspect of our work, we very much appreciated this body's emphasis that the transportation plan really should be unconstrained. It should be visionary. We don't want to close our options. At the same time, as we're moving into the transportation element component of your comprehensive plan, we are required by state law to consider a financial constraint. So I just wanted to emphasize that we have been working with your finance folks to get a general sense of what is Woodinville's likely transportation budget over the next 20 years. Sadly, it's not enough to be able to fund all of these awesome investments. If we looked at kind of all of the projects that we could potentially build, it's almost $200 million in investment. But really over the next 20 years, kind of our transportation budget is probably something much closer to, 87 million and maybe even less than that when we're considering that some of that really needs to go to maintenance. So it might be something closer to 50 or 60 million. So a lot of choices in front of this body. The last slide that I'll leave you with is just kind of where we are today and kind of all the things that are going on. One, we are going through SEPA review process. Mr. Grumlock has been really doing a great job of getting all of that submitted to the state and reviewing agencies so that we can move forward with that and hopefully have kind of a determination of non-significance. So we have a public kind of that's out for public review right now. The draft plan that's in your packet is actually in front of Commerce right now, and they're doing their 60-day review. And so, as those things are wrapping up, we would definitely hope to come back to this body again in May, seeking adoption of the transportation plan. And as we move into the summer, really kind of working toward adoption of your comprehensive plan, relevant to us, the transportation element, and thinking about the next exciting task is how do you fund some of these projects, and your impact fee program is a big piece of that. So looking to retool it to make sure that it's pointing at this project list. So that's everything from me, and I'd be happy to take comments and questions.
Councilmember Arndt.
Thank you. I have quite a list stored up for you. So first, I just wanted to thank you for the work on this project, and hopefully that we will continue to refine it and move it forward. One of the things I was interested in is kind of the next steps for this planning process. I know we have our CIP discussion, and you've gone through looking at how our fee structure might help fund some of these projects, but there were several elements within the plan that called for things to be changed or done that isn't necessary. There's no work plan necessarily spoken to for that. I'll give you some example, a prioritization list for sidewalk projects. That's something that is in the plan as an action item, but what does the work look like for something like that moving forward? Is that prioritization something that we will see before the completion of this final transportation plan? Is that something that we move into before our CIP process?
And I can address some of those projects that you are mentioning are more programmatic projects: sidewalk panel replacement, sidewalk replacement, crosswalk safety. I'm just coming up, pavement evaluation or pavement overlay. Those are all going to be programmatic projects. And I think the way we will do is, as part of the CIP project, the staff will put together, similar to what we did for overlay last, I think we had a 5 or 6 year plan that we came up with based on the condition, and we proposed, staff proposed as part of the budget process and CIP how to implement those programs. So a lot of those would be programmatic approach. Some of those are also operational and maintenance projects, or addressed in an operation and maintenance aspect as well. So the transportation plan gives us the CIP level projects to address those big projects, to provide an avenue for grants and funding. So that would be the goal, the vision part is what transportation plan does. But we'll continue to have those programmatic projects that we'll bring to council. ADA plan is a perfect example. Correct that it did not necessarily come into transportation plan as an ADA plan, but there are projects that will hit those goals, like the sidewalks and the walking paths and connections that hit those goals and vision.
Thank you. I asked this because we just had this update on our strategic plan, our economic development plan. What action items have been taken? What is the next steps? And so I was looking for something of that nature in this, as part of this plan, beyond simply the project list, which we may or may not be able to get to based on our CIP discussion. One of the other things that I was excited about was to see that the West Ridge connection was up on our, special menu of projects. But I am very leery because of the price tag associated with that connection, $8 million. And I noticed that is because the sidewalk conforms to the current road layout. And this is something that residents have been asking for decades. And I know with a price tag of $8 million, it's never really going to make the cut on our CIP list. I would love to see a study about an alternative route, how can we get creative to get people off the West Ridge? Clearly, it's an important project, but out of our potentially $50 million for all transportation. Is 8 going to go to that piece of sidewalk? I doubt it. So how can we move forward a study that would look at that in a different, more creative way so that when we have our CIP discussion, we have a realistic figure of potentially seeing that project to fruition?
That's something it's funny you mentioned that. It's something we've talked about at the staff level. The first step in this one, normally a project's got that kind of conceptual feasibility piece. I think even before this, we do something exactly kind of what you're talking about, is an alternative analysis of what are our options and what are kind of the ballpark costs with those. And $8 million may or may not be the right number. But looking at what those different alternatives are before we get too far down the road on any particular solution.
So is that something that happens early in the CIP process? Okay.
So that would probably be the first step for that project if council wanted to do that as we go through the budget and the CIP process for the next biennium.
I would certainly be interested in seeing what those alternatives could be.
That's 5 minutes.
Thank you.
You'll have a second turn. Any other questions? Councilmember Best-Campbell.
There was a level of service slide that was up earlier that shows Woodinville Duval Road as a level, it's red, so I don't know if that's D, it's not quite F. But it doesn't look like we have any projects to address, yes. So it doesn't look like we have any projects to address that in the CIP. So we admit that there's going to be problems on Wood Duval, but it's red in both scenarios. So are there capacity projects that we're talking about that are going to secondarily affect that in a positive way?
Actually, I want to clarify, and I realize that the way the slide is presented is pretty confusing here. That's actually the functional classification. So recognizing that it's a principal arterial, it's got a lot of need. The color on the linear lines does not indicate level of service. From a level of service standard, we looked primarily at intersection performance.
And if I could just add, Councilor Best-Campbell, is that Wood Duval, I know we receive quite a few concerns about traffic and the queuing that we see on Wood Duval. One of the things that Public Works is looking into is upgrading our signals and controllers because they have reached or way beyond past the life. So we are starting to look into it, and that would be another upgrades, that program that we would bring as to how to upgrade, prioritize the upgrading area, and then slowly make progress towards upgrading our outdated system so that they can sync and they can be remotely adjusted.
So what you're going to bring us is a way to mitigate it so we can kick the can down the road a little bit more, see if we can mitigate it just with improving signalization. Is there any talk about removing some of the road furniture in the middle? Is that a future looking option? So the planter in the middle, which with the water and all of the maintenance and all that, in terms of widening at some way future date, is that a possibility as well?
As of now, it doesn't warrant a widening. And also, there's certain things that you can continue to do with widening. There's also before we widen, and as you can imagine, Wood Duval goes through a very dense residential neighborhood too. Any widening would require a lot of impacts to that residential area. But as of now, it is not warranting a capacity of widening, but what we are looking is we're trying to optimize the signal and the timing and the queuing to the best. And again, just because of those upgrades, that doesn't mean it's going to fix the queuing that you would see. As Kendra had mentioned, there's also a lot of pass-through traffic that you're seeing through Wood Duval and to the freeway, from the freeway, which is not necessarily local traffic, but a pass-through traffic. So that's the direction staff is looking at in terms of optimizing.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Taylor, you have.
Oh, I was just going to comment on that. A previous council, a long time ago, widened Wood Duval through Woodinville. So I think the problem is upstream, that everyone comes through. So if you widen it, more people come through. Might be something where you do some signalization at about 172nd or 176th or somewhere right there, and slow down the signal, slow down the traffic coming through. Might help us out.
Councilmember Arndt.
Thank you. One other issue that I wanted to suggest is to add, in here we have a couple of our bullet points. I'm trying to find them on here, T5 and T3.3, and they both talk about increasing pedestrian safety, which we know is one of our council's strategic priorities for the year, around school zones, and partnering with our district and our other jurisdictional bodies to improve student safety and pedestrian safety around school zones. In having some discussions with some of our neighboring jurisdictions, they have gone to using traffic cameras to enforce school zone speed limits during times when students are present. And as we heard in our legislative update, there are, boundaries about where that funding can be used to support pedestrian safety and underprivileged communities in the area. And just as we are looking at ways for our funding to help feed back into the system and make improvements, I think that potentially could be, I don't know if it's a specific project or it falls on the policy side of something that we can evaluate, of adding those cameras in school zones, particularly around the high school and Woodin Elementary, and then up along 124th Avenue, just as ways to generate some, both improve pedestrian safety and student safety in those areas, and to generate the revenue to then make the systematic improvements in those areas, in those communities. So that, and then I wanted to call out section T-3, which it was talking about the preservation of street trees. And I really liked that. I just wanted to highlight that portion because we have had developments coming in where they're, redeveloping a property and they remove all the trees along the street, and that's not something we like to see. So I was really glad to see that the preservation of street trees was encouraged in this transportation plan, and that's one of those programmatic elements I'd love to see come back into our code so that as we're going forward, we're preserving those trees. And the last question I had, before I run out of time again, is just thinking about the interaction between this transportation plan and our previous discussion on potentially having the transfer station here in this city. One of the things we call out in our letter is that the county must comply with any jurisdictional ordinances or policies we have in their mitigation efforts. So in this transportation plan, we measure the level of truck traffic by weight along particularly 202. I'm not familiar enough with the levels of weight and whether or not that would have to change if that site is placed there, and whether or not that impact would then have all these other impacts on our transportation system. Is that something that changes to this document would then impact the mitigation that the county would have to do if it's cited here? Am I correct in that understanding?
So it's not, the NERTS side is not part of this plan.
Yes.
But as part of the NERTS itself, the evaluation, Fair and Pierce is also helping us. Fair and Pierce is our on-call traffic or transportation consultant as well. So they're helping in analyzing the NERTS impact on cities' infrastructure now. And I think some of the comments in the letter was what mitigation, right? Is what mitigation the EIS says these are the trips that are generated. These are the types of trucks that are coming through it. What mitigation are being proposed for the infrastructure that is currently existing and the new ones that we are going to install? So I think that was part of the NERTS evaluation in the NERTS. So that's just specifically regarding NERTS. The transportation plan itself, I think, similar to strategic plans, similar to other plans that council is working on and implementing as well with staff, transportation plan is going to be that plan that we'll have to evaluate every year, not only to understand what's happening to the growth rate, so that to understand how the level of service is working in terms of concurrency. And one of those things may be like the GB rezone. How does that impact? Where's the timeline on that? Where does the infrastructure projects, where do they line up? Is it in 2024? Is it in 25? Is it in 2044? So a lot of that will happen, but if we feel that we need to make changes, significant changes to infrastructure, transportation infrastructure that is proposed in transportation plan, we will have to do an amendment, we review and amend the transportation plan if there is a significant change.
Okay, it kind of answers my.
I think to answer your question, yes, NERTS should be responsible for mitigation of their impacts. The specific weight of the trucks would be one of those factors that we'd have to evaluate, or they should have to evaluate. They have not, which is one of our comments in our NERTS comment letter. If I have to sum up their basic approach to traffic at this point, traffic's already bad, so And that's one of our comments is that's not an acceptable answer here. So you need to do more homework on that. And I think whether it's the weight or the size of the trucks or what have you, those are pieces that we're pointing out that you need to evaluate and plan to mitigate for.
Okay, I was just wondering how binding this document is in terms of what mitigation they would have to do if they selected the site.
So I think one of the comments we had in the NERTS letter or feedback was to do a level of service evaluation like we did for the overall growth and everything, to see that too, because to see how, if there are intersections that are already will be failing in 2044, if anything, those will just the failing will happen even sooner than 2044. So I think that was one of the comments that we have said. So any impacts to the LOS, level of service below E, which is what the standard is, would require mitigation, just like for any other projects. And the mitigation will depend, the projects will depend on the impacts, whether it is through the truck loads or through the road widening, whether it's safety. That was the information that staff is looking for in that EIS.
If I may add, there's a number of policies that are in here that speak to state of good repair and maintenance. So I would say that the plan does provide some policy foundation. We could certainly take another pass through that, make sure there's nothing else that's best practice that could be added to kind of more, I would say, make your position a bit stronger on that. The last piece of that, and another mechanism that the city has at its disposal, is updating, for example, its traffic impact analysis guidelines to make sure that you're also looking at, for example, pavement health. So,
thank you. No, yield the floor.
Councilmember Evans.
Thank you. I'd like to go take a look at the draft project list for safety projects. So I'm glad to see the streetlights along Northeast 181st Place, but another thing that we had talked about was reducing the lanes there on 140th, where we have people speeding through because it goes from more of a rural area where it's a 40-mile-an-hour down to a much more restrained, and people are trying to use that. And originally we talked about maybe putting in temporary blocks so that we could widen the sidewalk area, have some dedicated bike lanes, and reduce it down to one lane each way, in addition to these streetlights and, painting the crosswalk and all that kind of stuff. Yep. But I don't see that on here. Is that because that's just not expensive enough to make the list, or is it because it's dropped off? Or can we just speak about that? Because I think it's a really important project.
Well, I appreciate your support for the project. What I would say is that, first of all, we do have it on our main list of projects. We reflect it, it's kind of arbitrary. What bucket do you put it in? We put it in a ped bike bucket rather than a safety bucket, but honestly, it fits in both. But to your point, though, when you're looking at the top performing projects, that just didn't make the list. It's not to say that at this snapshot in time, when we looked at within a very constrained world, what are maybe some of the investments that might be in there, it was probably close, but it wasn't one of those top ones. However, what I would say is this council has asked us not to financially constrain. You've asked us to provide kind of an unprejudiced list of projects, kind of a large menu to consider. So I'd say that project is absolutely on the project list.
Well, I think one of the things that I'm really looking for, and Asha, I don't know if it's something that we get from you or from the consultants, is how these weightings are done. What's going into them? Because, for example, I take a look at the community that lives around there. There's a retirement home there. People are trying to get out and walk, and they're feeling not safe because of how fast cars are going, because of how uneven the sidewalks are, that kind of stuff. And so, when I take a look at putting in those streetlights, it seems at the same time, if we're going to be making those sorts of changes, that we would maybe reduce the lanes as well to really enhance that safety. But if we don't know what those weightings are, and are we taking into account populations and walkability and just all that kind of stuff, or is it strictly costs? Like, what is it?
So with regards to the project you were talking about, it was the 140th Road Diet project.
Right.
So, and I think, again, we are fine tuning, getting all these lists and projects together. So there are lots of buckets that it's falling under, so bear with us. But the thought, similar to West Ridge Connection, the thought on that is to face that Road Diet project as well. So we have done right now with the speed radar, we have done some rumble strips, and we have put, and I think that one of the other project was the warranting the hawk signal, if that was something that we would look into warrant analysis. And that is also another project where the Road Diet, how are we going to implement the Road Diet? Because instead of investing completely for the complete street, do we phase in terms of add an island, or do we do some traffic calming measures? So when we bring
or some planters to just like block a lane. I mean, like something inexpensive where we could test out the Road Diet, I guess.
So when staff looks at CIP process, when staff looks at the CIP project list, that would be one of the projects, because all of these projects will be presented to council, and they will be, so transportation is ranking at a very high level, but the CIP process will go into ranking between the projects as well, dependency on project and our sequencing of the project as well.
And I think that's what I'm looking for, because every single project on the constrained and the unconstrained has passionate people behind it, right? Passionate neighborhoods, passionate businesses. And just having a decision-making mechanism so that we can do that weighting and that rating would be super, super helpful.
Correct. And we'll bring that, I'm speaking for Mr. O'Neill, but that's what we would do with the CIP process is, bring that rating and present all the projects and the rating, and then have council, of course. And there are some projects that are going to, that has to be done in terms of capacity, in terms of LOS, in terms of safety projects, in terms of obligation. Those are projects will come. And then, of course, as council has seen on the CIP project, will be projects that, instead of an $8 million or a $7 million project, how do we break it down? How do we phase it? And that's something that staff will present as well.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I wanted to echo, I am interested in also seeing, we've talked about it for a while, what options are there that exist on the West Ridge to get people safely downtown. And I agree that the $8 million price tag is jaw-dropping. It would be challenging. So I would also be interested in seeing some other options if they're viable. I know that there was one, I saw one on the pipeline trail, I guess. There was an option there, so that could be part of that discussion too. I would like to say that I think I mentioned this before, but I was coming back from Costco. I wasn't aware that this radar speed on 140 was up. And I wasn't paying attention, and my wife mentioned that you're going 35, and I looked up and it was 25, and so I did slow down. So it had the necessary effect on me. So, but my memory serves, we were going to collect data on that for a period of time. Can you refresh my memory what the period of time was, and then we're going to relook at that and then make an evaluation at that point?
So I think we were going to, we had done the very, very preliminary warrant analysis for a signal. And I think now we were waiting to implement some of these improvements, the speed radar, rumble strips, and then give like a month or so for people to get used to those improvements that are there, traffic calming, and then we'll do another warrant analysis to see what's happening with the counts, what's happening, and we'll also do speed studies as well, because that's to understand what's happening with speeding, what's happening with the crossing as well. So we're hoping to finish that so that could be included in our CIP process in helping potentially prioritize or rate the project.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else that hasn't spoken twice? See none? Okay, thank you for your work. I appreciate the work of you guys too. All right, so our last business item, the main event, I think, at least what I can tell, is business item number 9, consideration of the 2024 community grant applications and award allocations. Before we get into this, I want to say that you would think this would be one of my favorite things because we get to give money out. I actually dread it, not because they're not good to give out projects, but we have a lot of great projects, but we have to prioritize, and we only have a finite amount of money. So this is actually one of my least favorite things to do because we have to say no to people, and I don't like doing that. So, Ms. Winston, can you take it away?
Thank you and good evening, honorable city council members and members of the public. My name is Alana Winston and I am the community engagement coordinator here at the city. And I have the pleasure of presenting the 2024 community grant applicants for your consideration. Before we jump into this presentation, I would like to thank everyone that applied for this year's community grant and thank everyone who showed up tonight. And giving a voice to the programs and the awards that we've seen on paper. So yes, thank you for being here tonight. Having applied to several grants ourselves, we know how much work is put into them. So thank you. I suppose let's move on. Potentially. There we go. Okay. Program overview. Woodinville's community grant program is celebrating its 11th year of supporting local groups and organizations in various events and activities that are accessible and community driven. What started as a $5,000 grant opportunity in 2013 has evolved into a program with $25,000 in available funds today. Throughout the years, the city has had the honor of funding programs where in some cases they've turned into traditions, while still attracting and awarding funds to new applicants that diversify the list of opportunities that are available to the community. So as I mentioned, it was funded in 2013, and the purpose of the community grant is to promote the city's vision, economic development, and provide for events and activities that are of general community interest and value. And again, for 2024, we have a budgeted amount of $25,000. I've included the I've included the eligibility and criteria for the community grant program for awareness and to communicate that the criteria has not changed from the previous year. I will mention that according to the criteria, 5 of the 8 applicants have been deemed eligible for funding. 3 of the applicants satisfy some of the criteria with 1 or more caveats that will require council's approval for consideration. As we move along in the presentation, I will point out the applications that are in question and share details in regard to their eligibility. Additionally, I did email council earlier today notifying you that I had some mistakes in the original staff report that I drafted for you. An updated staff report has been shared with you all, as well as printed versions. I apologize for the mistake, and I solemnly swear to never do mental math while writing a staff report ever again. And here we go. Our first applicant of the evening, we have the Woodinville Arts Alliance Teen Arts Alliance. The Teen Arts Alliance promotes small events and activities throughout the year that are open to the general community. They have several activities planned for the year should they receive grant funding, starting with the art-based business project. This is the main project for the Teens Arts Alliance. This project will teach teens how to run an art-based business. Second, they have the Youth Art Show, which will be held at Tara Jennings Art Studio, opening on March 8th, as well as a farmers market project. Teens will be designing and painting panels for each of the entrances for opening day of the market. And lastly, they have their Creative Career Series. This is info sessions for teen artists to enhance their portfolios, learn how to start a creative business, learn what career options are available for aspiring artists, and more. The Teens Arts Alliance is requesting $2,800 for these activities. Next, we have the YMCA of Greater Seattle. The YMCA plans to put together family-friendly performances, games, and activity booths for the summer Celebrate Woodinville Festival. This includes, a request of $7,000 for performers, event rentals, crafts, supplies, staffing, etc. Next, we have Pollinator Pathway Northwest. Pollinator Fest is a public event set up by Pollinator Pathway Northwest, scheduled for May 4th, 2024. It is meant to educate the community about the importance of pollinators and what each of us can do to support pollinator education with friends, family, and community members. Pollinator Fest will showcase sustainable practices that can be replicated by anyone who is interested in supporting pollinators and their habitat across the city. They will have a festival with several speakers joining from UW, Bellevue Botanical Garden, and the Washington Native Plant Society Program Committee. In addition to that, they will have over 20 informational booths with local Woodinville organizations. They'll have food trucks, musicians, and more. It'll be a hoot. They are requesting $1,160 for speakers' fees, tour guide honorarium, musicians, and portable restrooms. Woodinville Farmers Market. Woodinville Farmers Market is dedicated to supporting farms and small businesses that provide fresh produce, flowers, treats, and handcrafted art and more to the community. The Woodinville Farmers Market is open from May through September, rain or shine, attracting people throughout Woodinville and into our neighboring cities. Some of you might have noticed me and Mr. Grumbaugh there a few days this summer. We had a blast. Best summer ever. And the farmers market is requesting $6,440 for new tents, tables, and chairs, a new PA system, lapel microphones, induction cooktops, and new cooking pots and pans. Next, we have Heart Repertory Theatre. Heart Repertory Theatre conducts an array of live performances ranging from classic plays to contemporary productions, fostering cultural engagement and artistic appreciation for the community to enjoy. They are requesting $3,500 for new production lights that'll be housed at the Sammamish Valley Grange. This is one of the 3 applicants that is kind of in that gray area that will require council's approval whether or not to move forward with grants. But 2 of the things that I want to note to council is that events with Heart Repertory Theater will take place outside of city limits. And then tickets for production costs are $25, $20, and then reduced prices for Rotarians in the Chamber of Commerce, but it is not free of charge. Next, we have the Woodinville Repertory Theater. Woodinville Rep is expanding its commitment to the community by offering a comprehensive education program in the dramatic arts that is accessible to all members of the community. They are requesting $25,000 for staffing, honorarium for theatrical teachers and professionals, venue fees, insurance, background check fees, marketing materials, accounting support. But as they mentioned during their comments, is that although their request is big, they can do a lot with less should you partially grant them with funds. This is another one of the applications or applicants that does not fully meet the criteria for grant funding. Reasons being, again, various events will take place outside of city limits, and then funding would allow for financial assistance or pay what you can options for those who are in the program. So again, it is not free of charge. So something for you all to consider. Next, we have Homeward Pet Adoption Center. There's No Place Like Home 5K Rescue Run is a family and pet-friendly race that assists with operating expenses of housing and supporting homeless animals through race registration, sponsorships, and donations. This grant request is actually for a sponsorship to an event that requires, registration and payment of $35 prior to the day of the race, and then it is raised to $40 for a day of registration. Again, this is not free for the community to attend, so this is the 3rd applicant that, again, is kind of in that gray area. They are requesting $5,000 for event sponsorship from the city. And last but certainly not least, the Sisters in Action Sports, or SAS, annual skateboard competition. This is 21 years of shredding the gnar. Approximately 40 to 60 people of all ages from across the region gather at Rotary Park Skate Park to have fun along other skaters. This skateboard challenge has become a community favorite over the last 20 years, even before this grant was a thought. SAS is requesting $4,290 for permitting and insurance, a sound system, prizes, refreshments, judge, MC, coordinator fees, and marketing materials. And this is an overview of all the applications that we just touched base on. Again, we have the Teen Arts Alliance, the YMCA of Greater Seattle, Pollinator Pathway Northwest, Woodinville Farmers Market, Heart Repertory Theater, Woodinville Repertory Theater, Homeward Pet Adoption Center, and Sisters in Action Sports. In total, this does put us at a request of $55,190 with a deficit of about $30,000 and 100. You can see it. Pretty big deficit, but I did touch base with the applicants and asked if there's any way that we can trim something off of their applications, and some applicants were very gracious and did so, and others made it very clear that they are asking for what they need. So here we are today, And the next steps would to be are to allocate funds for our friends.
Thank you. Councilmember Taylor.
Yeah, just for ground rules, I guess, can we get a finance call? Where does the money come from? And if we go over budget, where would it come from?
I'd be happy to help you with that. The funding for this grant program comes out of the general fund dollars, and so if council were to award in excess of what's budgeted, it would come out of general fund reserves.
And if, since we don't print money, where would it, could we offset it elsewhere?
Well, the council could always reprioritize other items that have been budgeted and put off another project to fund an increase in the grant projects if they directed us to do that. If you're asking if staff is prepared to propose where that would come from, I don't think that staff is prepared to make a proposal like that this evening.
Okay. I guess with that, I would like to continue the conversation and have that type of information come back before we get into carving it out.
Councilmember Evans.
Thank you. So when I look back at your February report on our budget, it looks like we are in a very different budget state than we thought we were when we went into this biennium planning. So can you just give us an idea of, are we ahead or behind on operating revenue that has come into the city versus what we thought when we did this biennium budget?
We're a little ahead in some areas. In sales tax revenue, we're a little ahead. We're a little bit behind in a couple of other areas. Right now, development services revenue is an example where we're a little bit behind. In terms of revenue sources, the property taxes are stable, utility taxes are stable, sales tax revenue has fallen flat, but that's what we projected for 2024. So from those general fund sources, we're in a fairly decent spot.
Yeah, and as we heard in our legislative agenda, we were able to bring forward some of the grants that we're going to receive from the state by over a decade. So we're in a good place there as well in regards to the money that we've put aside for the trestle replacement project. So having said that, I know I personally have heard from very, very many community members in person, over email, at the store, about how they really want us to invest in more events in Woodinville. People are always talking about the summer events that we have, from the Glow Run to Celebrate Woodinville. They're talking about the various events that we had at Winterfest. I know our friends at the Woodinville Repertory Theater were there participating free of charge, showing up, making it an amazing event with lots of people really taking account. People love the car parade. And if anything, people are saying, please invest more in things to do here in Woodinville that brings people into the businesses, which then directly impacts our sales tax revenue. It brings people to the community. It gets them out and about walking. It connects people across the community. I think it's time for us to relook at the amount that we have budgeted here and really listen to the feedback that we've gotten from our community members that say, make Woodinville more of a community place where people have lots of things to do other than just coming here to drink wine. So I want to put out there that we revisit this budget, knowing that we are in a very different place than we thought we would be going into this biennium.
Councilmember Arndt.
Thank you. I would agree with the mayor's statement that this is not the most fun business item. I would, while I agree with all the things that Councilmember Evans has said in terms of community feedback and the need for more events, I would urge us to stay in our budgetary amount for this particular grant, and that we would then look at our next biennium as increasing this, because we have seen year after year that the demand for this kind of thing is higher. But just in respect to our current budget, that we keep to the restrictions we've placed on ourselves.
Anybody else? So I think we probably, at this point, probably need a conversation on whether we have two, maybe three opposing viewpoints. What's council's desire? Do we stay within the 25,000, or are we talking about increasing that, or what's the desire of the council, or do we need more discussion on that? Councilmember, Deputy Mayor Randolph.
I will go on record of being one of the people that actually enjoys this task. It's something that we're tasked with by the people of Woodinville to make hard decisions. And I'll be honest, this is probably one of the hardest that we tend to make, because there are some very valuable nonprofits that do a lot of hard work that go with very little recognition. And to be honest, I can kind of relate to that. So this is going to be a super difficult piece. I believe we can stay well within the 25,000 that we've already budgeted for. There are several nonprofits that have been listed, and thank you for actually bringing those to our attention, Alana, that there are several that are a little bit on the wire in terms of our contribution guidelines. So I think that's a good place to start. And I think it's also good to consider those nonprofits that thought about reducing the amount, and they were actually being fairly considerate. Some of these numbers are relatively small for the impact that they can have, and I think we should think along those lines and make sure we stay within the budget with that in mind.
Anybody else? Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, I just want to highlight before we get into this conversation too, that while some of the applicants may not meet all the official guidelines in terms of what the hard guidelines are provided, some of them excel in other areas as well, including being duplicate. Some of the things provided here are so unique that it provides something that isn't available anywhere in the region, and that it provides a resource to our community that may not have been available without going 2 hours away. So I just want that to be considered as well when we get into this conversation, that although may be a little, may not meet the guidelines 100% based on that, the value they could provide to our community to bring unique opportunities for our community to engage together is valuable.
Anybody else? So I'm trying to figure out how the best way to move forward here is, and I was thinking if the council's okay with it, we just go down the line and maybe highlight what your top priority is and see what we have a consensus based on that, and then we can go from there. So does that sound okay? Councilmember Best-Campbell.
In previous years, we've done this, we've gone like one by one, and we just sort of raise hands, so we don't have to do like a voice vote every time, just to be more efficient. If we want to go like number one, raise your hand if you like this one, and just maybe do a tally, if that would be maybe a little bit more efficient and less nerve-wracking for everybody in the audience.
I'm okay with that. Is council okay with that? Councilmember Taylor.
Okay, I'd like to know, are we staying with the $25,000 budget and making it work, or are we talking about expanding it? And if we expand it, can we come back with some ideas how to do that from finance?
Deputy Mayor Randolph.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to that and go, I think we've talked about, like, this is a really hard decision to come to, and we don't know what we'll end up at. I say let's get started by going down the line, deciding on what the numbers will be towards the end. I think we can stay in budget, well within budget.
Okay. Why don't we, I think Councilmember Evans.
I just had a question. So some of these I would be in support of, but I would want more details and to know, like for the YMCA, last year we were taking a look at what does that mean and what could they do with a reduced number and how many people would, so I think it's not just do we support it, but can we have a discussion about reducing the amount too?
Okay. Why don't we open it up if we have any questions right now as far as if you want to know the details before we get to priorities so that we can kind of have a more informed decision, if that's okay. If you have any questions, let's get them out there so that we better understand which ones we want to support. So if you have any questions on the YMCA, for example?
Yeah, so for YMCA, is this for doing movie nights again, or was it for something else?
No, this is not for movie nights. Last year, 2023, the YMCA submitted 2 applications. I think they were approximately $6,000 a piece, give or take a few thousand. And then the YMCA did retract one of their applications and submitted one for $6,000, which was not for the movies. It was for participation in the Celebrate Woodinville Summer Series. They had provided blow-up bounce houses, games, and booths for families to have fun and participate at the festival.
For the Saturday event?
For the Saturday
event. Is that
event.
what this is for?
Correct.
Okay. And then for the farmers market, did they indicate, is this expanding the farmers market or is this replacing stuff?
It's replacing the items that they already have due to wear and tear.
Okay. And then for the Homeward Pet, we haven't sponsored that one in the past, have we?
We haven't. That's this one kind of struck me as a little bit surprising, especially as a sponsorship, rather than approaching the city and asking for the sponsorship separately from the grant. However, I didn't really have that discussion with them. They just came in with the application. I said, thank you very much. But no, we haven't sponsored Homeward Pet in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hart.
Just one more general question. Are you aware of any of the applicants who are pursuing funding from other sources?
Yes, so I've been working pretty closely with the majority of these applicants, and they are chasing for culture grants. They are on all the newsletters. They are registered to Councilmember Perry's newsletters. Councilmember Perry is always pushing information out like that, and a lot of these applicants are aggressively chasing funds, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to come for ours as well.
Of course, thank you.
Anybody else? Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, I just want to open up the conversation in terms of number 6, the repertory theater, in terms of what we're actually going to be, I guess, raising our hand for here, because we've been provided with multiple numbers here. Can you provide a little more information about what you've been provided about the different number options that we've been provided here in terms of what their ask is?
Can you clarify, are we talking about Hart Repertory Theater or Woodinville Repertory Theater?
Woodinville Repertory Theater.
Would it be appropriate for me to call one of the representatives up to kind of
Sure.
explain it in more detail?
Absolutely.
All right, we have Heather McAdams.
Thank you, Council. I'm not sure if you were able to receive or pass around this handout. Basically, we are prepared with the maximum amount to implement the program so that it's sustainable going forward. With the help of Shelley Pearson, who was formerly of Mulbach's, and did their education and outreach programs, we would establish systems that permanently create our education program going forward. So that's the dream. That's what we're aiming for. But we are prepared at this time. We have already even started our education program with a playwriting course that just kicked off this past weekend. And as we develop more community partners who are willing to let us use their space when their businesses are closed, currently, we have partnerships with the Heritage Society here in Woodinville that they are offering the playwriting class and those types of things to scale back on our cost. So if you look, for example, with the $10,000, we would be able to get the minimum amount of paperwork that goes along with creating a program like this: bookkeeping, insurance, background checks, managing the staff that goes into creating a program like this. And we would focus solely on the children's education portion for the most part. Now, upscaling it to a $15,000 grant, then we're prepared to offer more adult outreach classes to fill the void that's been left where there are no community programs really for classes for adults since Molvax has left. That's kind of a gap for adults to have a place to gather and learn a skill and learn something creative in their lives. So that's kind of how we're looking at the tiering for the grants. Are there any questions? Matt?
There was a mention previously about one of the criteria that we have set forward is events happening in Woodinville. And it's something was mentioned that I think it was both you and Hart Repertory are having events outside of Woodinville. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So some of our classes are in places like King County Library. We're planning on having voice actors read to children within the library. Technically, the library is outside of city limits. Others of our classes have been planned at possibly the Sammamish Valley Grange, which I believe is right on the edge of city limits. I'm not quite sure if that falls in or out. Heritage Society is very well within city limits. Vaulting Frogs Preschool, where we've hosted some various rehearsals and such, which would probably be a community partner, is here in city limits. So you're talking about locations that we're partnering with local businesses. Some might be in city limits, some might be out of city limits. But all of them are directly related to Woodinville City and are a part of the community giving back. So it would be a shame if it's excluded because the businesses that are willing to open their doors to us for very discounted rates are just outside the city limits.
Do you have any demographics, like how many? I would assume that you get a large majority of Woodinville kids taking part in these things. Do you have any data on that?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that. Part of my outreach this week is I'm meeting with the superintendent of North Shore School Districts to possibly eventually expand this program to serve Woodin Elementary along with Cottage Lake Elementary and other elementaries within Woodinville who may not have access to the same funding that some PTAs are able to provide to their students, so that Woodinville Repertory Theater could help fill that void in their programs as well, especially with the new funding cut for orchestra, et cetera.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, one of the things that we heard was that this one may have been a program that I guess charged for participation. I heard that there was a pay what you can model. If there was a student, let's say, who wanted to get involved but couldn't afford it, what would that options be available for them to participate?
So currently our goal would be that the program is based on what the school uses for their reduced and free lunches, that we would go by those numbers for student assistance and financial aid. Now, as far as the adult classes, again, with the higher level of funding, we're able to say to adults, pay what you can. If, for example, you have seniors who are wanting to take the playwriting course, who this is out of their reach, that we would be able to say to them, if you are willing and able to pay $20, great, come join the class. If you are not able to pay this time, we have you this time, so that we can expand that. Again, it really depends on the amount of funding that we receive, because we do have to pay teachers, and not everyone is able to volunteer all of their time to promoting these programs. So we do have to have some amount of pay for the professionals who spend their time. So those who can pay, of course, we would ask that they pay. So it's not completely free in that sense. But based on financial need and the inability to pay, especially with our youth programs, we would like to be able to offer free and reduced pricing for those classes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other council questions on any of the applicants? Deputy Mayor Randolph.
I'm just looking at Homeward Pet and this new idea of sponsorship. That would be a very different thing than what we've done before, and different from what I understand sponsorship to be. Did they perhaps impart another way to collaborate with them since they'll be here in the city?
I am happy to reach out to Homeward Pet and see if there is an alternative way or a different avenue that we can go about, supporting them that doesn't take away from community grant funds.
Councilmember Taylor.
So I just did a back of the napkin zero to get 25,000 allocated with all of the groups except for the repertory theater, big ones there. So Woodinville Arts Alliance, YMCA Pollinators, Woodinville Farmers Market, Homeward Pet, and Sisters in Action. If I add that up, we're about a little over 6.75% high. It comes out to 26,690. So if we do an equitable reduction by about 6.75%, we can make that all fit in 25,000. I don't feel good about doing this without coming back with the finance, understanding where the money comes from and what we can do to maybe extend and go over. But that's how I can see hitting all of the big ones, and I believe in all of them that are up there. I'd like to see the repertory theater have coverage, but those are just big numbers that kind of blows the budget.
Councilmember Arndt.
Thank you. I think if you look at the numbers up there and you take a similar approach and you fund the Arts Alliance, the YMCA, the Pollinators, the Farmers Market, Sisters in Action, and then you leave the three that had that kind of borderline case aside, I think that those are all organizations that fall well within this category that we can, several of them have provided revised estimates on their funding. We could say that they are all good, and then to take the remainder of our funds there and allocate it among the last three. And I would question what other ways we could participate with Homeward Pet on their run, what other sponsorship opportunities other than the community grant, just to eliminate that option, and then look at what money we have left to help support theater in the community.
Councilmember Evans.
So as much as I support Homeward Pet, I just feel like this ask is much more of a business ask than it is for a city grant ask. So I just feel like this is something that a business would do in terms of sponsorship. Additionally, I think that it's hard to just I don't know, I have a hard time allocating funds to somebody who doesn't even bother to show up and talk to us and answer questions. And so I would like to get more insight, especially if we're gonna stick with the 25,000. I would really want to hear what some of these things are gonna go towards. I mean, some of these asks are pretty big, and I don't know that we should just take this and say, okay, these ones that have been coming back time after time get their full ask and everybody else gets the remainder. I think that we deserve to hear from those specific organizations what it is that they're going to be doing with those funds, how they're going to serve the community, and be able to answer our questions similar to what the Woodinville Repertory Theater just did.
If I may add, in defense for Homeward Pet, since they are not here, the person in charge of their application and the sponsorship for the No Place Like Home run did resign the day that this was due. She said, "Thank you very much, I'm out of here." So I can reach out to who they have left and again see what options they're willing to explore. I do also want to point out that these sponsorships, as you mentioned, it's more of a business approach. They did ask us for one of the higher sponsorships. There are sponsorships that are $2,500, $1,500, $500 if we want to partially fund their request. Again, that can be with or without the community grant funding, whatever council decides.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, before I ask this question, first I want to say I'm going to ask about the farmers market. I'm a big supporter of farmers markets. I mean, I used to volunteer for this market, so when I ask this question, it's nothing about that. What I do want to ask, though, is they're asking for tents, tables, folding chairs. When I'm looking at things that we're funding for the community, it's things that would allow these programs to be available to our community. When they're asking for this equipment, are they alleging that their equipment no longer functions, that they can't use this stuff, or is it just they want to get new stuff to make it look better or function better? I'm curious what that ask was.
I don't believe their requests are purely for aesthetic reasons. I think they are asking for these upgraded items because after years of being out in the summer heat, especially not having coverage coverage from the sun or the elements along Festival Street, things get beat up. Things get beat up in transport and setting things up. They also had their storage trailer stolen recently. Everything I think came back, but this is just a really long-winded way of me saying that I think they are in need of some upgrades. To your point, yes, the requests or what the funding would go towards is different from like what the other applicants are requesting for. However, without the tents, without the equipment, without the chairs so that the farmers, workers, vendors can rest, there is no market.
So a couple of things are starting to coalesce here. So we can move forward. It sounds like Homeward Pet isn't getting a lot of enthusiasm at this point. Is that kind of accurate? Okay, so why don't we strike that? There's 5,000 trimmed off that. We have two repertory theaters. I'm going to throw it out there that Hart Repertory it was described as being outside city limits, and we have another repertory group. So I'm going to throw out if that's acceptable to be able to strike that. Is that okay, Deputy Mayor Randolph?
I did kind of have a question, kind of for all three of the arts related things that we're dealing with: Hart Repertory, Woodinville Arts Alliance, and Woodinville Repertory. Is there any crossover where we could probably get reuse of resources?
Can I get back to you with an answer?
Let's do that.
Thank you.
And the other one that is, well, it should be obvious. We're going to stick within 25,000, which sounds like it's the desire of the council, or at least in that ballpark. Woodinville Repertory Theater is going to have to, we're going to have to do less than the ask. So I think, is that pretty acceptable? So unless we have objection, we want to put it at $10,000. No, Councilmember Taylor.
Yeah. Okay, back to Councilmember Arndt's suggestion, funding all of them except for the two theaters and the Homeward Pet. That would be a total of $21,690, leaving $3,310 on the table. Just so we're at $21,690 less those three.
Deputy Mayor Randall?
Yeah, I was going to reach out and say, can we start getting some numbers on the sheet just to get us anchored? Pollinator Pathways Northwest, it's a really small ask. I think we can definitely do that. I think they reduced their original amount. I appreciate what they're doing and look forward to collaborating with them on tasks to get additional pollinator pathways along East Rail. Sisters in Action Sports, also full ask. They are a long time project. I think they do good in the community. I don't know if we have anything else functionally within Woodinville that does what they do. So I'd like to see that continue as a long time tradition and request that full ask. Woodinville Arts Alliance, I think that they also do good for the community. Rounding some numbers, I would put it at 2,500. Woodinville Farmers Market, I am not certain if they would get money from any other contributor besides Woodinville. So I also see them at the full ask. So it looks like we have 48, oh, that's my math. I didn't give everybody else. There's a whole. I would not contribute the full amount for YMCA of Seattle because they have other means. They are a fairly large organization, and Woodinville is a fairly small city. It is the YMCA of Greater Seattle, which I think they'll be fine without our $7,000. Of course, we could figure out other things to do. We might be able to do a bouncy house with the chamber.
You want to cut that in half? You want to what? All together. What are you planning here?
Well, that's why I'm looking up at their board. I'm like, I have my numbers here, but right now I'm in the seat of the bad guy.
You still having fun?
Oh yeah, man.
Okay, just checking.
You got to do it, right? Heart Repertory Theater, I think we said that they are outside of the city limits. I would skip them for now unless we have anything left over. Woodinville Repertory, I would not give anything less than $5,000 because they are kind of a solution and fill a number of holes. There's a number of programs that they could do here in the city that I think would be actually probably promote different businesses, do a lot of collaborations, and actually promote the arts within the city. I think we could get additional funding, but we need to start them for moving forward. And I think that's everybody that I had on my list.
I excuse me, I will mention that you did not provide a number, even a reduced number for YMCA of Greater Seattle. Are we just going to?
I will defer to other council members.
Absolutely.
To say zero.
Who's next?
Councilmember Evans.
So he's going to let me be the bad guy. So when I take a look at the impact of these asks across the year, across the city versus $7,000 for one day, I have a really hard time with that. I think that we need to ask them to significantly sharpen that pencil. As has been stated, YMCA of Greater Seattle has a lot of funding sources. They have a lot of ability to engage. We already support them here locally and partner with them. So I would like to see that reduced to like $1,000 or $2,000. I think for a one-day event where, you know, we're taking a look at some of these other asks that are significantly broader in scope, I would like to see that reduced by quite a lot. And I would like to see that money put towards the Woodinville Repertory Theater, especially with the cuts that North Shore School District is doing locally. They can step in and offer things that our school district will no longer offer because of their funding shortage. So I think this is really important from a full community involvement.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, I just want to second those statements that were made. Specifically, what I differentiate the Repertory Theater is the Woodinville Repertory Theater is focused on education. It's talking about the youth here and the programs available that aren't available anywhere else in the area other than through the schools, which we know in a lot of areas are at risk. So I would recommend what Councilmember Evans just said, and that money that was cut from there would be added to the Repertory Theater part.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
I think it's pretty chintzy to skimp the Woodinville Arts Alliance by $300. I'd like to see that go up. We can take it out of the Y. In terms of the numbers that we see up there, if you look at our previous years, we have a lot of different programs. There are length and breadth. There are a lot of different programs. We like to give out a lot of small amounts of money. We don't like to give out big chunks of money because we feel terrible because we can't give everybody large chunks of money. So for future, it might give everyone a little bit less heartache if it's not a 5-figure ask, if it's a 4-figure ask. When you come to us, we like to give it to a lot of different people. There's a lot of arts up there that are definitely not being met. For first-year projects, we generally don't fund at a full level because we've just never had experience with the project. It's nothing personal. It's just everybody has to go through the learning curve of how to apply and what to ask for. Previous years, we've paid the YMCA $5,000. That's what we paid them last year. If we want to cut it, I don't know what that means in terms of projects at the Woodinville events, but I don't think it's going to necessarily diminish them. But I do think we should be cautious about anyone new we're giving money to. Let's let people ease in with the application, ease in with the amount of money they're asking for, and then over time, once they show us what they're doing, we really can get more buy-in. And then next year, when we rebudget for the biennium, we have a better understanding of how much money are we really talking about, with the understanding that we do want to give out a lot of little small ones, but if there are larger asks, maybe we have a separate part of our budget for that so that we can keep doing these smaller programs that are super uniquely Woodinville. The Sisters in Action is very niche and very important, and after 2 decades here, there's a lot of alums. So that's, to me, that seems like it's more in line with we are always going to fund that program. So for the Y, if we want to cut it to 0, fine. If we want to give it some money, fine. But I don't want to go above, I think, $5,000 for a first-time grant for anyone, just because we've not seen necessarily what that program looks like. And over time, we can increase money when we start to see what it is. So I'm just trying to be reasonable with how we're easing into it and not having all of these expectations of the rep. If we give them $10,000, that we have all of these expectations and pressure on them. I don't want to do that. These are supposed to be fun and not stressful grants. So that's my suggestion. If we want to reduce the Y to whatever we want to reduce it to, it's fine. But I would suggest that we just be wise and not overburden people with too much money, because with more money becomes more problems. That's what the song said.
So the way it looks right now, we're at 14.69 with what's currently, is that correct? Okay. Councilmember Taylor.
Yeah, I'd put 5 for the YMCA because that's what they've had the last couple of years. And they are certainly community-based, so.
I'd like to add, when I look at this, I look at Woodinville Repertory, for example, they're talking about 50 hours of classes. That's for a lot of people. I think you're getting a good bang for your buck versus some events that'll happen for one day. So I'd like to see us fund the $10,000. And if that means what we have there or what we had a minute ago, gets us pretty close to $25,000 with some a little bit left over that we could round up if we wanted to on something. Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, I would second that as well. Specifically, yeah, I am hesitant to give new programs above a certain amount of money, but this program needs this type of money to be able to start the program. That's the thing that they're asking for. Without a higher amount of funding, they might not even be able to get the teachers, get the space available. Then the quality of products even provided to the students that we're trying to provide here and the youth here, it's not the same. They're asking for that as the bare minimum to even get started here. So I want that to be considered. So I would agree with Mayor Millman as well.
Councilmember Evans.
I would also say that this isn't an unknown community group. They have been operating for quite some time. They've shown over and over the impact that they have on the community. They've shown up at events. They've, been an integral part of our community. This is just the first time they've asked. And I would also say that, yes, getting the infrastructure, getting the courses, the teachers, the space, the insurance, the background checks, that all takes capital. And I would, funding this at the $10,000 amount. And for the YMCA, yes, I think they're great partners, but they also have tons and tons of different funding sources that are not available to some of these other areas. And so if we take a look at the community impact over the course of a year, 50 classes for people who can do a pay what you can versus a one-day event that people need to travel to, I see much more bang for our buck in putting it towards the Woodinville Repertory Theater, especially given the cuts that we know North Shore is going through right now.
I'd like to add, if we as a council are desiring to go that way, the $5,000 from the YMCA is the one that's sticking out to get us within the $25,000 budget limit that we set ourselves. What kind of head nods on that being a good idea? Yes, no? Looks like I got a majority of head nods. Can we strike the 5,000?
We can strike the 5,000.
And that'll show us 24,690. See how I did that? 5,000 less.
Better than me.
Okay. All right. So we have that there. We want to more discussion, or we want to vote on this? All right. Let's have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Best-Campbell?
Yes.
Mayor Millman?
Yes.
Councilmember Art?
Yes.
Councilmember Taylor?
No, I'm not going to leave the YMCA out of it for all the time they've done.
Deputy Mayor Randolph?
Yes. Yes.
Motion passes 6-1. Thank you for the work. I know it's a lot of work, and that took a lot longer than we anticipated, but I appreciate everybody hanging with us. And thank you for everybody that showed up and advocated for your groups. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Second round of public comments. Do we have anybody signed up? Okay, just to remind you, when I call your name, you have state your name and whether you live in the city limits, and you have 3 minutes. Sharon Peterson.
Hi, I'm Sharon Peterson. I live in the city limits. I want to talk about the letter to King County in response to the dump. So interestingly enough, tonight during conversation, I heard that one of the key priorities of the city council is to protect school zones. So isn't it interesting that the dump site is right next to a school? So I think that here's the desire that I have, just to cut to the chase. My desire is for this council to be so adamant and so determined that we do not get a dump, that you're ready to go to court, you're ready to file for an injunction, you're ready to take it to Washington State Supreme Court, you're ready to go all the way to the top to get us out of this dump. And I think you have the support of several major citizen action groups around the city to help with that. And I think the turnout at the Woodinville open house thing that the King County did last Wednesday, I think, was enormous. And it was a very strong turnout. And the comments from the citizens were voluminous. And the court reporter was kept extremely busy all night taking comments. So if there was ever a groundswell of public outrage at no, don't put the dump here, I hope that each and every one of you heard that, and I hope that the staff heard that as well. The other thing I want to say is Mayor Bernie Talmas, who was the mayor of Woodinville for 8 years, and I ran into each other, and he did a traffic study with a staff member when he was the mayor and sent that to King County when they were trying to push a dump on him back when he was the mayor. And that should be in the public record. So I've sent an email to Jared. I've asked him to hunt it down. And I think that quoting back to King County, the study that we already did, whenever it was, I think Bernie was the mayor, I don't know, for 8 years, somewhere in the 2008 to 2015 timeframe, just off the top of my head. We have that. It's a matter of public record. We should, A, find that and quote it back to King County, B, repeat it now, make sure it's accurate and up to date, and add that to the letter that goes to King County on April 9th. A few things that I learned talking to Pat McLaughlin is King County is the 13th largest in the population of 3,000 counties. It occupies 2,307 square miles, whereas Snohomish County is 2,196 square miles. The population of King County is 2.3 million. Now you take those 2,307 square miles, compare that to the square miles of the tiny little city of Woodinville, then you take the 2.3 million and compare that to the 13,000 population of, again, the tiny little city of Woodinville, and we are being bowled over. So council, hear your public. Take action, fight, don't give up.
Thank you. Gary Harris.
I'm Gary Harris. I live within the Woodinville city limits. First of all, I heartily second everything that was said by the last speaker, that we need to be in the face of the NERTS people and tell them exactly what they cannot do in our city. I had 10 verifiable objective reasons why Woodinville is unsuitable for a NERTS site. I was on number 6. Woodinville site is across the street from a K-12 school. Okay, that's already been mentioned. It's already been mentioned that that is one of the things that NERTS says that they are really trying to look at is not being a school zone. So this is, you have young drivers, added congestion, possible increase in traffic accidents, and this is very likely a liability for NERTS. Item number 7, Sammamish River is directly across the street from the proposed Woodinville site. Even though they say it's going to be state-of-the-art dump, oil, brake fluid, gas fumes can contaminate the agricultural land. And if you get off on the south approach to the proposed Woodinville site, you parallel the ag land for over half of that 6.2 miles and 8 traffic lights and 3 roundabouts to get there. So the damage to farmers' crops, fish in the Sammamish River, absolutely unacceptable. Item number 8. The proposed Woodinville site is about 40% wetlands. So Woodinville was the lowest rated site for the NERTS, and they ruled out the secondary Kirkland site because they said it's too small. You take out the wetlands in Woodinville is the smallest site. So again, absolutely unacceptable. Item number 9, proposed Woodinville site is in a tourist business zone. This is not the case for the Houghton site. Woodinville stands to lose businesses, certainly tax dollars, and so then if we get the dump years from now, we have less money for CIP projects. Item number 10. NERTS already owns a Houghton site. People are not in Woodinville are not going to give up their site, and this is going to be in litigation for a long, long time if this comes to Woodinville. NERTS needs to know those things and know them in no uncertain terms. I have one final statement. May I take another 10 seconds? Or?
Sure.
Okay. Many of these 10 situations should have been a deal breaker on their own, and the 10 together present a situation that no rational thinking human should be contemplating. Increased truck miles driven, increased fuel costs and pollution, increased number of employees working more hours at greater cost, possible damage to farmland and fish-bearing river, loss of tax revenue and jobs for Woodinville, higher costs for consumers, less funding available to build a Woodinville site after you buy the land and the trucks and the employees. All these factors are real negative consequences of building the NERTS in Woodinville. Please use objective information in your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Port City Manager.
Nothing to see.
Mr. Yabroff. Sorry.
Thank you. I'm Steve Yabroff. I live in the city limits. I've heard what the previous 2 speakers have said about NERTS, and something that occurred to me is we're going to have to mount a political fight as well. So my suggestion is perhaps you or Brandon put together a opinion piece that goes into the Seattle Times detailing why the NERTS is inappropriate for Woodinville. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to highlight again, if people weren't here, there should be a petition on the table there. You can just QR code and sign the petition. We're trying to get as many Woodinville signatures to send to King County Council that it's not supported by our community. City Manager.
No reports this evening. Thank you.
Okay, reports of council members. Councilmember Evans.
This past weekend, I had the good fortune to chaperone the high school Thespies Awards and state tournament up at Central. We went into an active shooter lockdown partway through the event, and the kids were absolutely amazing. I will say Woodinville High School absolutely dominated. Bothell High School with Woodinville residents and Inglemoor also did an amazing job at state. They've been recognized both throughout the state for their excellence across a number of theater programs, but also nationally. We've had some of our Woodinville and Inglemoor High School students specifically be called out and recognized for things like acting, costume design, set design, all sorts of different things. And it was really amazing to see these kids over the weekend. So big props to them. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, 2 things. Sticking on the high school side, this week I'll be table facilitator at the North Shore Student Justice Conference, which is high school students from the North Shore School District talking to them about what city council does and local government, so I'll get to lead a table of discussions there. So if any of you all have great ideas about what high school people would find interesting about local government, feel free to let me know, because that'll be a fun thing to come up with. And second, just want to highlight that this week is Transit Operator Appreciation Week in King County, so I just want to thank all the operators who serve Woodinville, although I wish we'd have more service here. As someone who takes the bus to Seattle, I just want to thank all the local operators for the work for getting people to where they need to be.
Deputy Mayor Randolph.
Just something brief. I had the pleasure of spending time in Woodinville with this weather this past weekend. And one of the things that I want to remind everyone, if you are driving a car, please pay attention to pedestrians. And for each pedestrian and bicyclist, please pay attention to vehicles. Just spending time walking around the city, realizing one of the things that we want to do and kind of apropos of our transportation plan is the value of separated walking areas and separated bike areas, just because if I was in that roadway, it would feel a little bit too dangerous for me. And some bicyclists on the sidewalk. So just keep that in mind as this weather continues to improve. Get out there and enjoy it.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
Thank you. I had the opportunity to share a coffee with Chief yesterday. We picked each other's minds a little bit about DUI diversion opportunities. We have a very large wine industry here, and this is what happens when you go to college and you remember the things they tell you won't be on the test. It takes the body 1 hour to process 1 ounce of alcohol. If you have 5 1-ounce pours of 18 to 20% wine, you just consumed 1 ounce of alcohol. It's the same as a shot of whiskey. There might not be that much understanding about alcohol contents with people who are pouring the wine. So we brainstormed some ideas. Clearly there are other jurisdictions that have the same problem with pouring wine. Do you extend the time? How do you make it safer for people to taste, take their time? You don't need to hit 5 wineries at once and then go drive and find dinner. So we talked about different things that the chief is going to think about. I'm not going to put him on the spot to come up with all the ideas right now, but a lot of it revolves around active compliance, getting people to want to comply. We don't want to arrest people. We don't want to drive people away, but we do want people to drive away from Woodinville safely and make sure that all the people on the road are safe as well. So there was a joke made, but maybe not, a future opportunity for the chief to go and talk to some other jurisdictions about what are their diversion programs in Walla Walla, in Napa. Talk to those jurisdictions, find out what they're doing, and see how we can implement it in a very Woodinville-centric kind of way. So I look forward to seeing how we can do that, but in the meantime, remember that when you go wine tasting, it's no different than sitting in a bar. So be gentle, be careful. You don't have to pound. Woodinville will be here.
Councilmember Arndt.
Thank you. Just to follow up on kind of that idea of getting around Woodinville after you've been enjoying some of our wonderful wine. Deputy Mayor Randolph and I were at the East Side Transportation meeting last week, and Bellevue highlighted the success of their bellhop service, which is free transit around the city center. They've had more than 40,000 riders on that service since they started, I think it was this fall. And that model is paid for by businesses in the area, and it's free to travelers. And so we were kind of kicking around the idea of what a similar service here in the city would look like. And I'd be very interested in continuing that conversation with anyone. How can we get that service rocking here so that we don't have to get in our car after enjoying some wonderful wine? On a very different subject, I will also add that I had a conversation with our local HopeLink representative about families in Woodinville receiving services through HopeLink, and she gave me some of the numbers for last year. 96 households from Woodinville received services through HopeLink at their Kirkland office, and that's around 281 individuals who received some sort of food support or other assistance, but not including energy cost program, I think. So just some numbers for us.
Councilmember Taylor.
Nothing tonight.
I got a couple things. One, the Basset Hounds. So I get a lot of questions on where did the Basset Hounds go? Does anybody know? Are we getting them back in the same place? Are they going somewhere else? I know it's right up there with Trader Joe's and Blanco. So
They will be back in roughly the same location in roughly 8 weeks.
Okay, good information. Thank you. I have a meeting coming up, and I can't remember the date, but I have a meeting to discuss a cooling shelter. We don't have a designated cooling shelter in Woodinville, so there's a local church that I've talked to over the last 2 years, year and a half, about working with the city on a cooling shelter. So I'm looking forward to having more discussion on that and identifying a resource in Woodinville that unfortunately we're now having to talk about that we didn't have to talk about 10, 15 years ago. So that's all I have. A motion?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, everybody.